Chapter 2350. Seventh Master Ji was clearly unwilling, but Mu Shui forcefully pulled him away. He was still shouting and struggling, "Don't! My fruit!" But Mu Tsonglan turned a deaf ear to him. He dragged Seventh Master Ji and walked out impatiently. "Fruit? Excuse. Seventh Master Ji is so pitiful. It's his first visit and he'll definitely lose his virginity this time." "That's right. Didn't you see how anxious Mu Tsonglan is?" Everyone looked at Seventh Master Ji's round buttocks as Mu Tsonglan dragged him away. Their faces were full of sympathy as they whispered. At the same time, their eyebrows twitched and their eyes were full of vulgarity. A few people touched their buttocks in relief and couldn't help but shudder. Mu Tsonglan forcefully dragged GMO all the way to Chu Yang's room. Chu Yang and Mo Tianji had wasted an entire night's worth of brain cells and were just about to rest when they saw Mu Tsonglan charge in aggressively. With a bang, he threw the person he was dragging onto the chair. Chu Yang took a look and realized that it was GMO. He couldn't help but be shocked. What exactly did GMO do? Forcing Mu Tsonglan to this extent? And even escorting him to look for him at such a late hour? Something big has happened. Minister Chu. Mu Tsonglan's voice was urgent, but he kept it very low. His expression was extremely serious. Chu Yang was even more shocked. He said carefully, "GMO went to your house? Looks like GMO got into big trouble this time." He even used big to describe it? Mu Tsonglan was startled. He said, "That's right." "Ha ha ha." Chu Yang let out a dry laugh and said dryly, "This brother of mine is just a little mischievous and insensible. He always says things that don't make sense. Mu Tsonglan, who asked me to have such a brother. Please let him off this time on my account." Then Chu Yang patted his chest. "No matter what, I will make him take responsibility until the end." Minister Chu thought that GMO had taken a fancy to a woman. Yes, why not go to their house? Furthermore, he was being escorted here by the other party? Could it be that GMO had a second spring? But I didn't hear that Mu Tsonglan had a daughter? Could it be a niece or a granddaughter? But no matter what, Minister Chu's protective attitude still prevailed. He's my brother after all. If he bullies someone, he can bully them. But I can't allow him to be bullied. Moreover, I made a promise, I'll make him responsible. This should be enough, right? This matter he did it very well. However, this matter is not something that he alone can take responsibility for. Mu Tsonglan's expression was heavy. Chu Yang was even more startled when he heard this. Very good? He was very good at it but couldn't take responsibility for it? What was the meaning of this? Mu Tsonglan's words were usually layered and clear. What was up with him today? Is advisor Mo not here? Mu Tsonglan sighed deeply. His eyes were filled with anxiety and fear. Chu Yang was even more shocked. This matter actually has to involve Mo Tianji? Fuck. Don't tell me that Mo Tianji is going to help me uphold justice. I am even more confused. I say, what did you do in the end? Facing GMO, Minister Chu raised his eyebrows and shouted. I didn't do anything. GMO felt so wrong that he almost cried. You didn't do anything? If you didn't do anything, why would someone like Mu Tsonglan personally escort you here? You even want everyone to take responsibility for you? What kind of hateful thing had he done to cause such a situation to occur? Minister Chu's anger rose from his heart. He wanted to give this disappointing guy a good beating. However, Mu Tsonglan's following words made Chu Yang dumbstruck. The saint is here. The saint is here. This sentence made Chu Yang's body sway and stars appeared in front of his eyes. It wasn't just Chu Yang who lost his composure. Hearing this, GMO was even more unbearable. His body swayed and he couldn't stand steadily. He simply sat down on the ground. There was only one thought in his mind. Could it be? Could it be that the person I met was the saint himself? Originally, as the person involved in this intuition, if GMO's brain was a little sharper, he would have been able to come to this conclusion long ago. At most, he would have been slightly behind Mu Tsonglan. However, a mischievous person like GMO would definitely not use his brain if he could. Especially now that he had Mo Tianji who was the best at using his brain by his side, he was naturally even more lazy to use his brain. Thus, he actually did not notice the crux of this matter. He also didn't know that he had inadvertently discovered this explosive news and made such a huge contribution. Because he had already heard the commotion, Mo Tianji, who was standing at the door, naturally also heard this sentence. His eyes, which were always calm and full of wisdom, suddenly became somewhat fearful. Then, the fear completely disappeared and turned into a fierce look. He stood at the door like this, his expression gradually becoming dark and gloomy. They only listened to Mu Tsanglan and GMO hastily explain the matter from beginning to end. Chu Yang and Mo Tianji didn't interrupt at all. However, their expressions made GMO and Mu Tsanglan feel that they should go into detail and where they should just say a few words. And when Mo Tianji looked over, every single word in this sentence needed to be explained in detail. After tossing and turning for a while, he finally finished speaking. Just as they finished talking about this experience, Mu Tsanglan stood up and left with a heavy heart. The reason why he left in such a hurry was because the moment he finished talking, Mu Tsanglan clearly felt an unconcealed sense of wanting him to leave. Although Chu Yang and Mo Tianji didn't say anything and were completely expressionless, that fierce murderous aura was already brewing. These two clearly wanted to plan the next step of their plan. And naturally, the fewer people who knew the details, the better. Thus, Mu Tsanglan tactfully stood up and left. However, Mo Tianji said something just as he was about to step out of the door. And it was something that made him very surprised. For the time being, hand over all the military power in your hands to me. I need to mobilize all the military power within the imperial city, as well as all the military power within a radius of 3,000 miles. Mu Tsanglan couldn't help but be stunned. However, he immediately handed over the military power very happily. The Saint Monarch had come early and was in disguise. This matter was obviously very unusual. This made Mu Tsanglan feel a great sense of crisis. Facing the number one person in the imperial palace, a supreme expert, Mu Tsanglan simply didn't know how to deal with him. However, he could still confirm one thing. For the current Mo Yuntian, this was definitely not a good thing. After quickly handling the matter of handing over the military power, Mu Tsanglan left. Playing with the commander's seal in his hand, Mo Tianji's expression was very playful as he said, GMO, being able to discover this matter early can be considered a great victory. When the dust settles, GMO's unintentional actions this time will be the greatest merit. Hearing this, GMO immediately beamed with joy. This is nothing. Actually, it was just a coincidence. It really isn't much. Ah. Even though he said it was nothing, his face was filled with complacency. His complacency and complacency were all exposed in his final laugh. It completely proved that his previous modesty was nothing more than an act. Gather everyone, except for Xie Dan Qiong, all the brothers, including young lady Chu Ler Qing Wu, big sister Z, Tribulation Divine Soul, and brother Hu. Also, all the assassins of the Heavenly Armament Pavilion, and the person in charge of the Tianji Intelligence Department. Gather everyone. Also, I want to borrow all the experts of the Demon Emperor Sky, including the Demon Emperor. Mo Tianji's expression was very relaxed as he said these words very calmly. However, before he finished speaking, GMO had already stood up straight. For GMO this was really too rare, because he could feel that the current Mo Tianji was like a bow that was being drawn. A bow that was gradually being drawn. And the arrow was already on the string. Once the bow was fully drawn, the arrow would be shot out like a bolt of lightning. It didn't take long for everyone to arrive. Even Xie Dan Qiong was here. Although it was clearly said that he wasn't needed, how could Xie Dan Qiong not come when there was an urgent matter at hand? Those who should have come were all here, and those who shouldn't have come were also here. Thus, after Chu Yang gave the order, Xie Dan Qiong was beaten up by Gu Duxing and Dong Wushang and thrown out. The next moment, the auras of more than 20 saints merged into one and enveloped the hall. Thus, Xie Dan Qiong couldn't enter. Those who shouldn't have participated shouldn't have come in the first place. They would be expelled even if they came. Because in the following operation, Xie Dan Qiong, as the Heaven Emperor and the enemy's number one target, definitely couldn't participate in the operation. Although Xie Dan Qiong himself struggled and protested to Chu Yang and Mo Tianji, struggling was futile and protesting was even more meaningless. Now we will start assigning the specific tasks. Mo Tianji's dignified gaze swept across. Everyone listened quietly. This mission is very important. You must ensure that nothing goes wrong. Mo Tianji said lightly, do you all understand? Everyone immediately nodded to show that they understood. Well, everyone has their own responsibilities. I believe that everyone's tasks are clearly divided. But I won't ask you to die as an apology for your crimes if there's a mistake in the area under your jurisdiction. But I only ask that you accompany Xie Dan Qiong when he stands at the highest point while receiving the cheers and congratulations of the world. And you'll stand there with him naked buttocks when he stands at the highest point. Anyway, you've already lost your face. It's no big deal to lose your buttocks again. That's all. Mo Tianji's words didn't sound like a warning at all. It was more like a joke, a harmless joke. However, no one could laugh, including the two mischievous fellows GMO and Luo Kudi. This was definitely not a joke. This was the cruelest punishment. There was no doubt that Mo Tianji would definitely do it as long as you really made a mistake. Anyone who didn't vote for Xie Dan Qiong would hang their names on the banners during his coronation ceremony. Chapter 2351. Just imagining that scene made everyone's hair stand on end. Xie Dan Qiong's ascension ceremony, facing the entire world and standing at the highest point. At that time, would they have to accompany him naked? Stand at the top? All of these people were well-known figures with a certain amount of fame and prestige. They would rather die 10,000 times than be so humiliated. If that day really came, their ancestors would probably jump out from their graves and fight them to the death. Especially since everyone knew that Mo Tianji's request was definitely not just for show. If it really happened in their area, then Mo Tianji would definitely do what he said. If he said that he would let you go naked, you would definitely not have a single piece of cloth on you. At that time, even if you wanted to commit suicide, it would be futile. Men and women are equal. Therefore, my request also includes women. Mo Tianji's last sentence immediately attracted the angry glares of a few women. Zi Xieching, Mo Qingwu, Chu Le, Mo Le. The four beauties glared at him together. Who would dare to be a hero in the world? Even with Mo Tianji's strong willpower, he couldn't help but shiver in the face of such angry glares. However, he was determined not to change his mind. During this period of time, every single person who comes in from outside the 4 city gates, remember every single person, including their name, origin, cultivation base, and the names of 8 generations of their ancestors. Everything must be clearly placed on my table. Even if a mosquito flies in from outside the city gates, you must investigate clearly whether it's a male or a female. Mo Tianji's eyes sharpened. Including Chu Yang, the faces of the 8 brothers turned ashen. And the surrounding 3,000 miles outside the city. Mo Tianji continued to make arrangements. Hearing this, everyone broke out in cold sweat. When Mo Tianji finished making arrangements, everyone immediately scattered like birds and beasts, rushing to their respective posts. Mother, I don't want to accompany Xie Dan Qiong to the throne naked. Next, Mo Tianji made a trip to the Ministry of War. Previously he had already made arrangements. However, now that the Saint Monarch had come early, Mo Tianji felt that the original arrangements were not enough. Therefore he had to make arrangements again. Under the general's assembling drum, everyone above the rank of deputy general was gathered. Even the guards of the imperial city were all gathered. The first order was, close the city gates immediately. You can't open it for 3 days. If anyone dared to force their way in, they would be treated as traitors and killed without mercy. The imperial city guard immediately accepted the order and went out to assign tasks. Following this, Mo Tianji continued to give out tasks as he flipped through the documents. In less than half a day, he had given out over 3,000 officers in the Ministry of War. The generals of the military looked at Mo Tianji as if they were looking at an evil spirit in this world. What kind of person was this? Monster? Monster? Immortal? Evil spirit? His distribution of tasks was very reasonable and appropriate. In fact, some people didn't even know what they were best at. However, Mo Tianji had only looked at the information once before assigning tasks to them. This made them feel, this is what I'm best at. I'll definitely complete it smoothly. However, what was even more frightening was that Mo Tianji had sent out an entire army of 20 million soldiers. In fact, 1/3 of them had been sent out for missions that required them to wear casual clothes. After that, Mo Tianji went to the Heavenly Armament Pavilion under Xie Dan Qiong's command without stopping. These were the true subordinates of Xie Dan Qiong. Therefore, Mo Tianji was able to command them even more smoothly. He didn't have any scruples at all. The sky had already turned dark by the time Mo Tianji leisurely returned after he had made arrangements for everyone. In other words, Mo Tianji used almost a day to complete the entire operation. This efficiency was really hard to imagine. Half a day is still too rushed. I need to use the next 3 days to perfect this inescapable trap. Mo Tianji frowned and thought about the possible loopholes in his plan. After a long time he smiled and said, it should be enough. Regardless of how worried Mo Tianji, Chu Yang, and the others were, Mo Yun Tian still started to boil with excitement as expected. The ruler for more than 1,000,000 years was confirmed to be the incarnation of the heavenly demon. This was a huge event that could turn the world upside down. However, in the end, evil couldn't win over good. The heavenly demon Yuan Tianjia was killed by the experts of the human race. The person who presided over the destruction of the heavenly demon became the new ruler of Mo Yun Tian. Now the new emperor ascended the throne. For some forces in Mo Yun Tian, they didn't need to personally participate in the killing of Yuan Tianjie. However, the ascension of the new emperor required them to personally congratulate him. This was a huge event that concerned the survival of the forces. They couldn't afford to be careless. The ascension of the new emperor was set on the 18th of the 3rd month. It was the 27th of the 12th month. In other words, there were still 3 months and 20 days left. For some of the more remote places, they had already started to move. Originally, the ascension of the new emperor was set on the 8th of the 3rd month. However, Xie Danqiong had resolutely changed the date to the 18th of the 3rd month. They were already calling me a trap and a rabbit. Now they are even setting the date of my ascension to the throne on the 8th of the 3rd month. Gosh, I haven't ascended to the throne yet and you guys are already thinking of rebelling? Obviously, the Jade Flower Emperor had a huge grudge against the 8th of the 3rd month. The officials were helpless. Seeing the emperor so resolute, they could only comply. After all, the anger of the heavenly emperor wasn't so easy to bear. The whole world celebrated. However, the entire imperial city, including the surrounding 3,000 miles, was already covered by an inescapable net that couldn't be seen with the naked eye. Every day, Mo Tianji was making slight changes to fill in the loopholes in his previous arrangements. This time, there were at least more than 50 million people working under Mo Tianji. Even with Mo Tianji's brain, he still felt mentally and physically exhausted many times. For the first time, his originally clear and bright eyes were filled with dense blood capillaries. As a person of 2 lives, this was the first time Chu Yang saw something that could force Mo Tianji to this extent. However, Mo Tianji was still full of energy. Moreover, Mo Tianji viewed this matter as the biggest challenge of his life. It was an even bigger challenge after facing Diwu Qingru and the Dharma Supreme. When Chu Yang persuaded him to rest for a while, Mo Tianji said, "At this stage it's just defense. The pressure isn't too heavy. In the future, I still have to command hundreds of millions of troops to fight against the extraterrestrial demons. Compared to the ever-changing battlefield, this is just a small test. If I can't do it perfectly this time, how will I fight against the extraterrestrial demons?" Faced with Mo Tianji's insistence, Chu Yang could only let him be. It was just that Chu Yang had done similar work before. He knew clearly how huge Mo Tianji's workload was and how complicated and trivial the details were. To do this job flawlessly was no easier than commanding a huge battle. In fact, some of the more trivial details might be thousands of times more troublesome than a huge battle. After all, sacrifices and partial concessions were allowed on the battlefield. However, in this ascension ceremony, in the face of the Saint Monarch's interference, there really couldn't be any mistakes. Every day Mo Tianji's mind was constantly going through all the procedures. Now, his greatest rest and enjoyment was using his authority to forcefully assign Chu Lur to be his assistant. Every day, seeing Chu Lur's light and delicate body coming and going like the wind, Mo Tianji felt refreshed and energized. Even his thoughts seemed to have become clearer. Because of this, a very unrelated person, Chu Yang, came more often. When he had nothing to do, he would walk around and ask about Chu Lur's well-being. Then he would turn around and leave. After a while he would come back again. This made Mo Tianji extremely depressed, but there was nothing he could do. Especially when he saw that Chu Lur was so excited when she saw Chu Yang coming over. She threw herself at Chu Yang without the slightest hesitation, hugged Chu Yang's neck and hung on his body. This made Mo Tianji even more jealous. He was about to explode with anger. However, Mo Tianji didn't dare to flare up. He didn't even dare to show the slightest bit of anger. Chu Yang was really too important to this little girl. This little girl's position in Chu Yang's heart was really very important. She was directly treated as a treasure by Chu Yang. Therefore, Mo Tianji didn't dare to show any of his wild ambitions. If Chu Yang knew about it, the consequences would be unpredictable. Mo Tianji was very doubtful. If Chu Yang said, "Don't see Mo Tianji in the future," Chu Lur, who had always treated Chu Yang's words as an imperial edict, would immediately do as he said. As for that 1% possibility, Chu Lur would hesitate for a while and do as he said. As for not doing as he said, there was no possibility at all. If that was the case, it would be better to just kill Mo Tianji directly. Right now Chu Yang was sitting in Mo Tianji's private office. Chu Lur very attentively brewed a cup of Mo Tianji's best tea and then let Chu Yang sit on a chair to enjoy the tea. She ran behind Chu Yang and diligently massaged her big brother's shoulders with her 2 small hands. The little girl's heart ached. Big brother, I have to say something to you. You have to pay attention to your rest. You've been exhausted during this period of time. Looking at Chu Yang's face of enjoyment, Mo Tianji wanted to kill him. At the same time he wanted to cry but had no tears. Lure, I've been so tired under your watch every day that I almost went into shock. This guy obviously just went out for a walk. Why do you actually think that he's exhausted? This doesn't make sense. The treatment is so different. However, in front of Chu Lu, Mo Tianji absolutely couldn't quarrel with Chu Yang. Of course, the main reason was that he didn't dare to. Because in the eyes of that girl, anyone who went against her big brother was a first-class bad person in the world. There was no exception. Looking at other people's cousin and then looking at his own sister Mo Qingwu, Mo Tianji had an impulse to hang himself. They were both big brothers. Why was the treatment so different? Chapter 2352. Therefore Mo Tianji forced a smile and said, Boss, you must be exhausted these few days, right? Chu Yang hummed and hummed comfortably under Chu Lu's massage. Yes. I'm more tired than you. Mo Tianji was so angry that he almost kicked over the table. Don't you feel guilty saying this? How dare you say that you're more tired than me? Can you be any more shameless? Faced with such a terrible situation, Mo Tianji was extremely depressed. Ever since Mo Tianji had achieved success in his cultivation, he had never been in such a situation where he had to suffer in silence. Furthermore, it wasn't that he couldn't say anything, but that he couldn't and didn't dare to say anything. Sometimes Mo Tianji even felt that he was worse than a mute. At least he really couldn't say anything. He obviously had thousands of methods and tricks, but he didn't dare to use them. Fortunately, this situation wouldn't last for too long. As long as the city gates were closed for 3 days, Chu Yang would really get busy and his suffering would end. However, there were still 3 days. 3 whole days. As the saying went, a day felt like a year. Mo Tianji really felt like a year in these 3 days. The consequence of making Mo Tianji's days feel like years was that Mo Tianji had used a series of thunderbolt-like methods in these 3 days to thoroughly investigate everyone in the imperial city. It was like 3 days of thunderbolts. Mo Tianji's methods made everyone in the imperial city who knew of them tremble in fear. Those who were investigated didn't have any problems, but those who were in charge of the investigation were so tired that they almost fell sick. For 3 whole days and 3 nights, there were more than 300,000 people in total. None of them even had the time to sleep. However, in the end, the mission that belonged to them had mostly ended. They only needed to be in charge of assisting in the remaining investigations. They didn't need to bear the main responsibility anymore. Because they understood this point, after the entire process was completed, all the officials and soldiers who participated in the investigation didn't complain about how tired they were. Instead, they all heaved a sigh of relief. These 3 days were simply unbearable for a human to live through. This commander-in-chief Mo Tianji was a pervert, a complete pervert. Whether it was his mind or his body, he was a double pervert. Although everyone was cursing in their hearts, they also knew that the pressure that the commander-in-chief faced was undoubtedly many times greater than their own. Mo Tianji's way of doing things was very perverted. But everyone still admired this pervert very much. They finally heaved a sigh of relief. Everyone had a night's sleep. These people almost wanted to cheer and celebrate. Mom, this day is really rare. The next day the city gates opened. After 3 days, the number of people waiting outside the city had already exceeded 100,000 people. In these 3 days the people's lives were in an uproar, turning the world upside down. Why didn't they let us enter the city? We came specially to support the new Emperor Mo Yuntian, Heaven's Emperor. However, no one left. This was related to Mo Yuntian's future Celestial Emperor Ascension celebration. How could they be willing to miss it finally when they could enter? Everyone cheered and rushed in like a swarm of bees. However, when they reached the city gates, they realized that the Mo Yuntian soldiers were heavily guarded. They stood in 2 rows in bright armor. There was a row of 10 tables by the city gate, and behind each table sat a scribe. Moreover, behind the scribe there were 2 other people sitting and waiting. They seemed to be substitutes. Everyone who wants to enter the city has to register first before you can enter. There is something that everyone must pay attention to. Once you find that the registration information does not match the facts, you will be treated as a spy. There is no need to explain because the person involved will be executed immediately. A dignified military officer stood up straight and shouted at the people of Jianghu who were about to enter the city. Why? You have to register to enter the city? What is this? I am already giving you face by coming here. You still have to register. Let us in. There was a commotion. Obviously, this unreasonable decision had aroused the anger of the crowd. However, the officers looked at the people in front of them expressionlessly. Their eyes were calm and sharp. It was as if they didn't hear the clamor at all. However, the next moment there were numerous sounds of arrows being pulled back. On both sides, numerous shiny arrows were aimed at the people who were clamoring. God-slaying arrow. Outside the cold light, there was a dazzling light. However, that light told everyone that this was the #1 killing weapon of the Heaven Imperial Court, God-slaying arrow. Only the Imperial Guards had the right to use the death arrow. Once this arrow was shot, no matter whether the arrow hit the target or not, the target would still die. Because as long as this arrow was shot at you, even if you didn't die under the arrow, you would become the enemy of the entire Mo-Yuntian. They wouldn't rest until they were dead. Facing the power of the entire Mo-Yuntian, even if you were a god, you would still die. This was the true meaning of the God-slaying arrow. The God-slaying arrow had not left the bow, but the people of Mo-Yuntian opposite had already kept quiet out of fear. Someone muttered, "Register then register, why take out this thing? To scare people?" That person's voice was extremely soft. He must have already submitted to the #1 killing order of Mo-Yuntian. Seeing that the situation was settled, another person said in a rough voice, "What is the meaning of this? Are you threatening us? I don't believe in this. We have so many people here. How many God-slaying arrows do you have to kill us?" This clamor immediately caused a commotion among the crowd. As the saying goes, the law can't punish the masses. They had so many people here. If the thousands of people here really made a ruckus, would the officers really dare to take action? Even if it was the God-slaying arrow, would they really dare to kill everyone here? Taking a step back, we are all here to participate in the ascension ceremony of the new heavenly emperor of Mo-Yuntian. This is the most joyous occasion of Mo-Yuntian. Would they really dare to kill people? Seeing red before ascending the throne, wouldn't that be very inauspicious? Seeing that the commotion was getting louder and louder, the situation was gradually getting out of control. That officer frowned as he looked at the sudden change. Clearly he did not have any ideas. Just at this moment, a series of hurried sound of horse hooves suddenly sounded. A fast horse rushed out from the city gate. A fully armored general rushed out rapidly. With a somersault, he had already landed in front of that city gate officer. Without any hesitation he gave him a slap. "Bastard thing, don't you know what is strict execution of orders and prohibitions? After being a soldier for so many years, don't you know that military orders are like mountains? Don't you even know how to kill people?" Following that, an order was given, "Release the arrows. Kill this bunch of spies." He actually gave out the killing order so unreasonably. Before everyone had the time to make a stunned action, they heard a whooshing sound. Countless sharp arrows shot out from the bowstring like thunder. After the first group released the sharp arrows, they immediately squatted down to make space. The second group behind followed and released the arrows. After that, they also squatted down and another batch of arrows was released. After 10 groups, the first group stood up again and released the arrows. The God-slaying arrows poured down like a torrential rain. Zhe Yuanguang was covered in all directions. Mixed with streaks of brilliance like starlight, there was also a gust of cold murderous aura. In front of him, there were countless human-shaped iron porcupines in an instant. A dense fog rose and made a slight popping sound in the air. Then, it turned into nothingness. On the other side, the people of Jianghu who were watching felt a chill down their spines. So this was the real power of the God-slaying arrows. Whoever was shot by this arrow, even if the archer's cultivation was high and his soul could escape from his body, he would not be able to escape. Once the arrow was shot, the soul would definitely not be able to escape. It could only be turned into nourishment for the arrow. The legendary God-slaying arrows were actually this powerful? Everyone looked at the small mountain of corpses in front of them, dumbfounded. Their faces were all pale. No one would have thought that these city gate soldiers would really dare to attack. Moreover, the killing power they caused was actually so terrifying. "What are you still standing there for?" The big bearded officer who came out later shouted, "Drag all the corpses of these spies to one side and burn them all. Quickly take back the God-slaying arrows. Do you still need me to teach you all these? Do you need me to personally demonstrate? Do you need me to personally teach you? Are all of you stupid?" Then he shouted again, "Light a fire over there. In the future, if you meet such people, kill them and burn them directly. Reduce the amount of land you need to occupy." After he finished speaking, he did not even look at the group of people in front of the city gate. He mounted his horse and galloped away. The rapid sound of horse hooves went further and further away, and finally it disappeared. Based on this general's cultivation, riding a horse was probably not as fast as his body movement. However, he came and went on a horse. Obviously he wanted to be imposing. And at this moment, this person's prestige was undoubtedly earth-shattering. "Why did you kill them?" someone shouted angrily. This shout was not out of grief or indignation. To these people who were already dead, those who were qualified to be indignant had already died together with them. Right now they were only angry because of this unreasonable killing. The higher-ups have ordered that the day of Heaven Emperor's ascension is approaching. If there are evil people who want to play tricks, those who do not agree with the governor are mostly his accomplices. Kill without mercy. The city gate officer was expressionless. "We're just following orders. If you do not agree, you can also try the sharpness of the god-slaying arrows." Try it? Who would dare to try it now? If they tried it, they might even pay with their own lives. No one had a second life. Not to mention, if they died under the god-slaying arrows, they would not even have the chance to reincarnate. Moreover, they would have to bear the crime of being a spy. That was a huge crime that would implicate their entire clan. If you still want to enter the city, line up and register your information. If you don't want to enter the city, the main road faces the sky. Please go to the other side. The officer shouted. Just now, because he hesitated for a moment, he was unluckily slapped in the face. He saw stars from the slap. He was angry. If he did not vent it now, when would he? Chapter 2353. The usually arrogant Jianghu men were now like obedient children lining up to buy tickets to a movie. Their faces were pale. Now, even if they wanted to leave and not attend the coronation ceremony, they couldn't. What if they were told that they were guilty if they left now? Then they would die even more unjustly. They registered their personal information and entered the city. When they entered the inn, they felt that it was different. Every innkeeper was like Sun Tzu, trembling with fear as they asked their guests to register their personal information. They even kowtowed and rolled on the ground to make their guests register their personal information. This was because there were orders from above. The inns were open all night and were not allowed to close. However, if a spy was found in anyone's inn, then they would be considered unlucky and guilty, unless they were completely clear when they registered their personal information. Anyway, everyone had proof of their identity. No one could fake it. This made all the innkeepers in the imperial city want to hang themselves. Business was so difficult and they were not allowed to close. They even had to bear the risk of being beheaded. There was no way they could survive this day. That was the thought of every innkeeper. If they were not afraid of arousing unnecessary suspicion, most of the innkeepers would rather close down than continue to open their shops. In the next few days, the divine senses of the saints were like tides, rising and falling one after another. They covered the entire imperial city and the surrounding 3,000 miles. This was undoubtedly a huge loss. 18 saints, 18 directions. With such a huge area, it was impossible to take care of everything with just one person's strength. Of course, if you ordered an expert like Yuan Qinjie, it was not impossible to take care of everything. However, who could order an expert like Jianghu? Who would dare to order him around? Although Mo felt helpless about this, he had no other choice. He could only brace himself for it. He had to ensure that no one would be able to sneak into the imperial capital without him knowing. With such a saint-level strong man's divine sense enveloping the area, as long as it wasn't a super strong man like Diho, it would be impossible to sneak in without a sound. Mo had already tried to do this. But even the two kings of calligraphy and painting weren't able to sneak in. In other words, even a 7-stars guard wouldn't be able to set up such a tight defensive line. If the Saint Monarch was still a level higher and dispatched an expert at the level of Diho to secretly cause trouble, then Mo would accept it. What could he do if he didn't? In Jianghu, a super expert who could reach Juniho's level was extremely rare. The sage didn't send out the experts that belonged to him on the surface and was still able to find such a character in the pugilistic world. This could only mean that the sage's level was too high, and he had too many trump cards. The absolute disparity in strength between the two sides was too great, and it wasn't his fault. It didn't matter if he admitted defeat like this. But on the other hand, if a sage didn't have such power, then he would have to be obedient. Mo decided to take a gamble because he believed that experts like Diho were not as common as cabbages in the Heaven Layer Imperial Court. Even a saint would not have such a strong bargaining chip. Even if he did, he might not be willing to sacrifice it for Do Chi. Mo Tianji's face was calm, but he was gnashing his teeth in anger. Countless people surged into the imperial city like a tide. After that, more and more people continued to pour in. Everyone, because of the lesson learned from their predecessors, obediently registered and then entered the city. Even experts at the saint level were no exception. Previously, there was also a primary level saint who wanted to make an exception, but in the end he was beaten half to death on the spot. GMO and Luo Kadi, who were in charge of this area, immediately took action and directly crippled this reckless guy. Then they stripped him naked and hung him high on the flagpole, establishing power. Both of them sneered in their hearts. Mo Tianji was currently lacking a qualified opponent to establish his power, and this guy popped up. Since he was unlucky, then I'll let him be unlucky to the end. Not only Mo Tianji but even GMO and Luo Kadi knew that this guy was innocent. There was no such spy who came up to cause trouble and exposed himself. But even if he was innocent, he became the most tragic victim under Mo Tianji's plan. Who asked him to be the first bird to stick his neck out. Naked to the waist, he was hung high. His flowing hair was combed into a smooth bun. His head was lifted up high, and his face was directly facing all the people coming and going. His cultivation was already crippled. Even if he wanted to commit suicide, he could not. He could only passively accept the punishment and humiliation. Time was of the essence, so Mo Tianji could only use such extreme methods. Including the tens of thousands of people who refused to register and were killed, there were similar groups of people outside the city gates. Adding them up, there were tens of thousands of people. He believed that most of these people were innocent and were not real spies. But Mo Tianji did not care whether they were innocent or not. What he needed was direct and bloody methods. This was a warning to the whole world that no one could be rash. If it was Chu Yang who carried out the same plan, perhaps he would use a gentler method. But in Mo Tianji's hands, it was always direct, bloody, and cruel. But it hit the nail on the head and was simple and effective. Mo Tianji did not care about infamy. What he wanted was the result and the safety of the ascension ceremony. 37,000 lives and a saint was hung naked. Such a cruel price had been paid in exchange for the order they had now. In the eyes of most people, this was too much. But in Mo Tianji's eyes, it was worth it. In his heart he thought, since you have the guts to jump out at this time, then you are courting death. Why did no one jump out except you? Since you think you are so powerful, then you have done many similar things in the past. You have to pay the price for pretending to be powerful. So you are a fool. Mo Tianji killed with a clear conscience. So, everything I do now is to enforce justice on behalf of the heavens. Well killed, well died. They deserved it. I have avenged countless innocent people who died in their hands, because they finally died innocently. Mo Tianji made a noble conclusion to his cruel actions. Everyone who heard this almost broke down. The men's testicles were cramping, and the women's menstrual cycle was irregular after hearing this. Although you had no choice but to do it for the sake of the big picture, it was still cruel. To think that you could find such a sanctimonious reason for doing it for the country, for the people, for the world, and for the common people. Shameless. As the saying goes, shamelessness is invincible in the world. Obviously, Mo Tianji had reached such a level. Hubugue stood in front of Jianghu city and looked at the fluttering flags. He could not help but sigh. Perhaps, once he went in, he might not be able to come out, right? He just did not know how many people like him would survive in the end. But no matter what, he had never had a chance to repay the kindness he had received since he was young. At this moment, it was time to repay the kindness. Shaking his head, Hubugue bent his body and his white hair fluttered in the wind. He slowly walked to the registration office. At his waist there was a tattered scabbard. Hubugue? The registration officer asked suspiciously, "Is this your real name? Are you sure?" Hubugue blinked his old yellow eyes, then honestly said, "Yes." Therefore, the registration officer recorded this name and the follow-up information one by one. However, he did not notice that the expressions of the people behind him changed almost at the same time when they heard the name, Hubugue. When they saw this hunchbacked figure walk into the city gate, one of them immediately put this information on the list of key monitoring and reported it one by one. Hubugue, primary saint, saber saint. This person was a swordsman of mysterious origins who was famous in the pugilistic world. He had always been alone. No one knew where he came from and no one knew where he went. He did not care whether he was right or wrong. He did things according to his own preferences. Among the relevant precautions that Mo Tianji had set, people like this needed to be paid attention to. Wu Yun, after a long journey, finally arrived at Jianghu city. Facing this city that he had been to countless times, this was the first time he felt unfamiliar. It was a heartfelt unfamiliar. There was no other reason. It was because this world had a new master. And he came on the orders of his master. There was no other reason than to do his best. Even if Xie Danqiong became the heavenly emperor, he would be disgraced and disgraced. However, it was easy to imagine how dangerous this mission was. Regardless of whether he could complete the mission or not, the possibility of returning alive was extremely small. But he had to come. Firstly, it was to repay his kindness. Secondly, it was for the restriction. When Wu Yun walked into the city gate, he had asked himself, how many people like me are there in this world? Maybe not many, but not few, right? He shook his head and smiled bitterly. He really did not know how to answer this question. The place that he came from was a mysterious place. It was a villa. For 5 million years, millions of experts came from there. However, no one in this world knew where that place was. No one in the pugilistic world knew about this nameless villa. It only existed silently. Every year, a large number of children were taken in there. Every year, a large number of assassins were spat out. Every year, the number of children who were taken in would exceed 100,000. However, the number of children who could walk out of that place would not exceed 3,000. The other 7,000 people were nowhere to be found. Until, one day when he accidentally walked into the back of the mountain, he unexpectedly discovered that matter. Wu Yun would never forget that day. Chapter 2354. Wu Yun still remembered the intense shock that almost drove him crazy at that moment. The deep cliffs that stretched for thousands of miles were about to be filled up by the skeletons. Those were some young bones. Over the years, many children could not withstand the cruel training and died. Their corpses were all left in the wilderness. He would never forget the moment when the instructor found him and looked at him coldly. The next time he went there, the cliff was still the same cliff, but the piles of bones had disappeared without a trace. It was as if what he saw last time was just a dream. So much so that every night when he dreamed, he would ask himself if he had really seen wrongly that day. Of the less than 3,000 people who made it out, a small portion of them would go to various big worlds and try to pass the examinations to obtain scholarly honors, obtain an official position, and manage a region. However, most of them would go to the vast Jianghu. Every person who came out of there, without exception, had the strength of Earth stage when they first came out. Keeping one's own secret and not telling anyone was the first rule. Even if they were old acquaintances of the villa and met by chance in the Jianghu, they were just strangers. Those who violated this rule would be killed without mercy. In addition, the villa only had one requirement. Every 500 years the person involved had to break through a small realm. After becoming a saint, it could be changed to one breakthrough every 100,000 years. Waiting for the mission order. Those who could not break through would only have a dead end. How many tens of thousands of years had passed? At the beginning, it would naturally take less than 500 years to break through. But the further one went, especially after breaking through the saint level, it was as difficult as ascending to heaven to break through one level in 500 years. If one didn't have enough opportunities and the help of enough natural treasures, there was almost a 100% chance that they would not be able to complete this advancement mission. If one could not complete the mission, then no matter how many contributions, merits, or hard work one had before, there was only death. There was no exception. Compared to the advancement mission, other things like wealth and power were not even worth mentioning. With life there was hope and a tomorrow. Without life, everything was just smoke. Those who came out of there deeply understood this point. Living was not easy, but dying was very simple. As long as the master willed it, the poison hidden deep in his heart would immediately take effect, and he would immediately die an unnatural death, his spirit dispersing. Of the 3,000 people who came out in the same year as him, how many of them were still alive? Wu Yun shook his head and smiled bitterly. He couldn't answer this question, but the only thing he could be sure of was that it was definitely not a lot. Perhaps the number of survivors was less than 10. In fact, it wasn't impossible for him to be the only one left. How many of the people who came out after him are still alive? What about before? This strict rule made the people who came out of that place crazily increase their strength. They went crazy to steal, rob, and obtain some heavenly treasures by hook or by crook. And the more it was like this, the faster people would die. Every one of them was fighting alone. There was no outside help. In fact, there were many times when they would kill each other in order to seize the opportunity to advance and survive. 3,000 people every year could be said to be a lot. However, after these 3,000 people came out, at most, less than half of them would be left after a year. After 5 years, the best situation was that there would only be 100 or 200 left. By the time the first 500 years was up, most of them would already be 2 or 3 little kittens. With the elimination of the martial world, these people became fewer and fewer. There were many people who had been alive for many years, and they had already gone extinct. There was often a situation like this. A person who came out in a certain year would only be left after a long time. But counting from that person, the people who came out in the next few decades would all die. Only then would they be reconnected. However, there was also one thing that could be guaranteed. Those who could survive in this way were all elites. How many of these elites were still alive could only be found in the records of the villa. Outsiders, including people like Wu Yun, had always thought that they were the only ones who existed. They had long been used to such a way of life. Wu Yun sighed spontaneously. Carrying his lifelong companion, a thin and long sheathless sword, he slowly walked into Jianghu City. His back seemed a little desolate. There was a sense of desolation and death. I'm old. I can't break through the next realm no matter what. This time, I'm afraid that this will be the last mission I'll carry out. How many people have I killed in order to carry out these missions? How many innocents have I slaughtered? How many innocents have I harmed? I really can't remember anymore. I can't count. The tide of people continued to surge in from all directions. Mo Tianji stood on top of the southern city gate with his hands behind his back. He looked at the people who were surging in from all directions. The wind blew and his black hair fluttered. The strong wind blew in his face. Mo Tianji subconsciously narrowed his eyes, forming 2 slits. However, the chilling light that shot out from the slits of his eyes was enough to make anyone's heart turn cold. There were people coming and going constantly, passing on information. These people were all moving at the speed of saint-level experts. They immediately sent the information of the people who came in from the city gate to Mo Tianji. The saint will definitely not allow Xie Danqiong to ascend the throne so smoothly. Therefore he will definitely take action. However, he will not be able to use the forces on the surface. On the surface he still has to praise and support Xie Danqiong. Therefore he will definitely not use his official forces. Some of the experts who are in contact with the saint and even the heavenly emperors in the Jianghu cannot be used. After all, it is easy to find clues. There are also the forces of the super sections. He will not be able to use them. Similarly, it is even more impossible for him to personally take action. However, the saint will definitely have some other secret people who can complete this mission. I can be sure of this. If he doesn't have such power, I will look down on him. He would not be worthy of sitting in his current position. No matter how despicable, shameless, unscrupulous and unscrupulous, we must admit that the saint's current position is undoubtedly the position of a winner. The winner's prize. For him to be able to achieve such a victory, it is his pride and achievement. Therefore we must not look down on him at all. Since everyone has been ruled out, where will the people who might come out to cause trouble come from? Mo Tianji's voice was very low. As soon as he spoke, his words drifted away with the wind. However, the expression on his face was grave. He used his finger to gently press on the 3 feet thick list of names in front of him. He said lightly, "It can only be in here. A storm is coming. Whether it is a good show or a disaster, it will start from tonight." The north wind blew Mo Tianji's hair and robes, making them flutter. Chu Yang smiled slightly and said lightly, "How many people have you confirmed now?" Mo Tianji smiled and said, "At the moment there are at least 100 suspicious people. However, only 3 people can be confirmed. There are more than 20 people who are major suspects. Everyone else also has their own suspicions, so we'll have to start exploring tonight." Mo Tianji sighed heavily and said, "This is only the first day." Mo Tianji had already racked his brains to find these people from the huge list of names. In this short day, the effort that Mo Tianji had put in was hard to estimate. Chu Yang nodded and said, "All right, since this is the case, Lura will accompany me tonight. I need to borrow her poison techniques." Mo Tianji frowned and said, "Letting a girl take the risk, this is not good, right? Why don't we find someone else?" Chu Yang said seriously and righteously, "What are you talking about? As a man of Jianghu, how can we deliberately avoid these risks that we have to face? We have to go through the wind and the rain of blood to be truly safe in Jianghu. How can we not get used to it? Moreover, if you can find a top poison expert like Lu, can you find one?" Looking at Chu Yang's serious face, Mo Tianji opened his mouth as if he wanted to say something. After a while, he lowered his head and said, "All right." First of all, what Chu Yang said was indeed reasonable. How could one see the rainbow without experiencing the wind and rain? How could one achieve peace without experiencing the rain of blood? Second of all, even though Mo Tianji was a peerless expert, he really couldn't find another top poison expert for Chu Yang. In the imperial court, people who used poison were rare to begin with. Chu Lur had a series of fortuitous encounters, and her cultivation in the art of poison had already soared to an unimaginable height. Given her current cultivation and attainments in the art of poison, even if she had yet to reach an unprecedented level, there was probably no one in the world who could be her match. Even if Wu Jueqing were to come personally, he might not dare to say that he could definitely surpass the current Chu Lur in the art of poison. Thirdly, Mo Tianji really didn't dare to object anymore. Because Chu Lur had been standing on the city wall all this while. Her face was full of anticipation. When she heard Chu Yang's words, she smiled and said, "Big brother is still the best. I know that I want to go out and move around. Staying in my room all the time is really boring." Mo Tianji sighed from the bottom of his heart and said, "I still have to remind you that these people are all real experts. You must be careful. Your own safety is the most important thing. Everything else is secondary." Chu Yang rolled his eyes and said, "So long-winded. Do I need you to remind me?" After saying that, he took Chu Lur's hand and left. Behind them, Mo Tianji turned his back. No one could see that his face was full of frustration. "Fuck, who told you to do that? This Chu Yang really thinks too highly of himself." Chu Lur, who was walking down the city wall, rolled her eyes. However, a smile flashed across Chu Yang's face before it turned serious again. Hu Bugui sat cross-legged in the room of the inn alone. He didn't know why, but ever since he entered Qianghua City, he felt a little uneasy. There was also a bad premonition that kept invading his heart. Chapter 2355. But after searching several times with his divine sense, he did not find anything. Was it an illusion? But how could it be an illusion? The intuition that he had accumulated over countless years in the Jianghu, how could it be wrong? Since it was not an illusion and his search was fruitless, it meant that the power that was targeting him was far stronger than himself, far beyond his imagination. With this thought clear, he felt even worse. However, after so many years of bloodshed, when had he ever had a good feeling? Apart from death, it was not a big deal. Even if he died, it was not a big deal. For him, perhaps it was an early release. Hu Bugui snorted, his face still showing a doddering old look. He closed his eyes and adjusted his breathing, not caring about the outside world. At this moment, there was a whistling wind coming from afar. Hu Bugui suddenly opened his eyes, two dazzling rays of light shooting out from his eyes. That voice was extremely overbearing and was directed at him. He still did not move and just stared at the door. The next moment, without warning, the door was shattered into pieces, and the room was filled with debris. A pitch-black blade with an imposing aura that could split the heaven and earth was coming at him. This blade was fierce and overbearing, and carried with it the power to split the heaven and earth. This was no longer a test, but a fatal blow. Hu Bugui's eyes flashed, and it was unknown when the blade was already in his hand. The blade flicked forward. With a ding sound, Hu Bugui's blade accurately touched the pitch-black blade. The opponent's blade paused slightly, but this slight moment was enough. Whoosh! Hu Bugui's originally cross-legged body suddenly fell back, and then floated up, standing firmly on the couch. In front of him, there was a burly young man in black, standing with his blade across his chest. Just now he had not finished his attack and had retracted his blade and did not force an attack. "Who are you?" Hu Bugui's complexion was unchanged. He gently coughed and swallowed the blood that had reached his throat. Although Hu Bugui's complexion was calm, he was in fact extremely shocked. He had faced countless enemies in his life, but today, it was the first time that he had been severely injured by someone with a blade. The person's blade was extremely fierce and overbearing, reaching a level that Hu Bugui had never seen before in his life. That person took a step into the door and gave Hu Bugui the feeling that a whole mountain range had moved and was pressing down on him. It was only a step away, but there was a huge mountain pressing down on him with earth-shattering power. "I am Dong Wushang." The black-clothed youth looked fiercely at Hu Bugui and said in a low voice, "You are Hu Bugui?" Hu Bugui narrowed his eyes. "Dong Wushang? Do you have a grudge against me?" "No." Dong Wushang shook his head. "You have a grudge?" "No." "Then why?" Hu Bugui flew into a rage. There was no relationship between the two of them, yet you attacked me for no reason. What does this mean? Dong Wushang looked at him calmly and said, "Because you're here to cause trouble." Hu Bugui suddenly raised his head. "No. You are." Dong Wushang said with certainty. He was not even willing to say half a word more and directly condemned Hubugue. Hubugue shook his head. I'm not. Before he finished the sentence, he was already interrupted by Dong Wuxiang. You're here to cause trouble. What? We're both people who use the blade and you're also at this stage but you don't dare to admit it? You dare to do it but don't dare to admit it? Dong Wuxiang's words were as overbearing as the blade he had slashed out. Hubugue's face twitched and was silent for a long while before he finally said, That's right. People who use the blade. This in itself was a kind of dignity. A swordsman could let down anyone in his life, but he would never let down his own blade. He would not disgrace the words people who use the blade. The person was the blade and the blade was the person. Insulting the blade was equivalent to insulting oneself, and even worse than insulting oneself. If you scold a swordsman's 8 generations of ancestors, or that swordsman may be indifferent. But as long as it involved the honor and disgrace of the blade, it was a fight between swordsmen. The dignity of the blade was not to be violated. Therefore, although Hubugue did not want to admit it, he still admitted it. Moreover, since the other party was so certain, he must have grasped a lot. Whether he admitted it or not might not have any more meaning. Dong Wuxiang nodded. At least you dare to admit what you've done, and can be considered a person who uses the blade. Not bad. Draw your blade, I'll give you a dignified death and let you die under my blade. Just as the best ending for a soldier was to die in battle, the best ending for a swordsman was to die under the blade. Hubugue's face lit up and he chuckled. Hubugue, the blade does not return. Suddenly the blade light exploded into a cold light that filled the sky and attacked Dong Wuxiang. From the first exchange of blows, Hubugue already knew that he was definitely not this young man's match, but he still chose to attack with all his strength. His eyes were very dazzling at this moment, and he hoped that he could display the sharpness of his blade in this final battle, and finally die under another peerless divine blade. Only such a death could be considered satisfying. Dong Wuxiang's dark blade had already turned into lightning. However, the thunderous movements suddenly stopped. Hubugue's face revealed a bleak smile and he said softly, Thank you, you didn't ask me anything. Because you won't say it, Dong Wuxiang said indifferently. Hubugue coughed and laughed. Good blade. With a touch of regret in his eyes, he slowly closed them. Since childhood he had been reduced to a tool and until now his biggest regret was not knowing who his parents were, not knowing where his home was, and not knowing who the person who turned him into a tool was. But in this life, he lived in confusion and died in confusion. His body was still upright, and his hand blade was still tightly gripped in his hand. The sharp blade was only half an inch away from Dong Wuxiang's waist. But he was already dead. Half an inch was actually an insurmountable moat. Dong Wuxiang slowly pulled out the dark blade from his chest, his face expressionless. His body flashed and he went out through the window. Hubugue's body slowly fell to the ground, and blood slowly gushed out, dyeing the ground red. Outside the inn, footsteps sounded. A group of soldiers and horses rushed in. Under the terrified gaze of the shopkeeper, the leader patted the shopkeeper's shoulder and said, Congratulations, congratulations. Isn't this room now empty? You can receive other customers and earn double the amount of money. This is a good thing. He smiled, put away Hubugue's body and strode away. The innkeeper's face was deathly pale, and he was on the verge of collapsing. Double the money? To earn double the money like this he would be scared to death after a few times. Wu Yun had always been cautious. After checking into the inn he pulled open the curtains and placed a pillow inside, creating a simple but very effective illusion. Then he flashed to the top of the wardrobe and no longer made a sound. This was a habit left behind after so many years of roaming the Jianghu. At his level of cultivation he no longer had to worry about being ambushed by enemies, but this habit could not be changed. It was already the second watch. The door suddenly rang 3 times and someone knocked on the door. Wu Yun slowly opened his eyes, and the long sword that never left his side was silently in his hand, but he felt that his palms were full of sweat. He completely did not notice when the person outside the door came. It was only when the door was knocked that he knew. The other party clearly knew that he was in the room. What this meant was self-evident. Just from this point he had already lost. The knocking on the door was the prelude to death. The person who knocked on the door was the death god. Who is it? Wu Yun asked in a low voice. At this time there was no meaning in not making a sound. It's me. There was a cold voice outside the door. It was only 2 words, but he could already feel the coldness of the other party's sword. It was as if the person outside the door was not a person, nor was it the death god, but an unsheathed sword with murderous intent. But what was the difference between a sword like this and the death god? The door slowly opened, and the world inside and outside the door were surprisingly connected. One was outside the door, one was inside the door. The person outside the door was a young man in black, his eyes like a sword, his body like a sword, his spirit like a sword, and his hand like a sword. Wu Yun. The person's sharp eyes instantly locked onto Wu Yun. Wu Yun chuckled. That's right. I've been unlucky all my life, so I named myself Wu Yun. I'm just mocking myself. The man in black said mockingly, if you are considered as Wu Yun, then what about the hundreds of thousands of innocent people who died in your hands? Wu Yun said indifferently, regardless of whether they are innocent or guilty, to be able to die under my sword, their souls will leave the spring, and they will no longer sink into the turbid world. Naturally they are lucky. The black-clothed youth nodded slowly. So that's how it is. It's your turn to be lucky today. Wu Yun understood the unspoken meaning of the other's words, so he asked, why? What? The black-clothed youth asked softly, then why are you here? Wu Yun narrowed his eyes and said, I am here to congratulate Heavenly Monarch Mo Yun on his ascension to the throne. Are you here to cause trouble? Are you trying to disrupt the Celestial Emperor Ascension ceremony? The black-clothed young man's face was cold as he said, who sent you here? How many people have come to congratulate me this time? He actually went along with Wu Yun's words. Wu Yun said nonchalantly, I've always been a lone wolf and I've come alone this time as well. What? Can't I? Indeed. The black-clothed youth shook his head. If you're here to congratulate me, then come with me. All the experts who came to congratulate me will be gathered together under unified management. Unified management? How am I supposed to act then? Wu Yun shook his head without hesitation. No. Before he could finish his words, a cold light flashed. The person in front of him had already attacked with his sword, aiming for Wu Yun's throat. Wu Yun was already prepared. He raised his head, leaned sideways and took a step back. However, the sword was as fast as lightning. Once again it came at him with lightning speed. This time it was still aimed at his throat. Wu Yun's sword was already in his hand, and he could counterattack at any time. However, in the face of such a terrifying sword, he did not even have the time to defend himself. In fact, he even felt a sense of familiarity with this person's sword. The sword intent was accompanied by endless loneliness. Chapter 2356. Swish, swish, swish. The two of them fell into a silent stalemate, no different from a normal fight. However, the seemingly ordinary sword was actually attached with a hidden and enormous power. Once it was triggered, it would be earth-shattering. As long as it came into contact with flesh, it could instantly destroy one's spirit, causing one's spirit to perish and be consigned to eternal damnation. 10 swords in a row. Wu Yun kept dodging, but he suddenly realized that he had already retreated to a corner and could no longer retreat. And the sword in front of him was still like a maggot, still chasing after him. When the cold light flashed again, the sword tip stopped in front of his throat. A trace of despair flashed in Wu Yun's eyes. He was not a match at all. Who the hell are you? Wu Yun asked dryly. In this world, there are only a handful of people who can force me to this point with just 2 or 3 moves. Which one are you? The black-clothed youth said coldly, My name is Gu Du Xing. It's a very strange name, right? I don't think I'm one of those people you think I am. Wu Yun's eyes flashed and he muttered, Gu Du Xing, such a thunderous name, how could I be unfamiliar? It's actually you. Why are you here? And you even participated in the Jasper Flower defense? Aren't you afraid that others will say that you are degrading yourself? Gu Du Xing? Degrading myself? It seemed that Gu Duxing really didn't know when he had gained such a flashy nickname. It turned out that the emperor, among his brothers, was not Xia Danqiong, but himself. This extremely flashy nickname made Gu Du Xing's heart somewhat uncomfortable. Even if he was called Lone Swordsman or Solitary Swordsman, in his opinion, it sounded much better than this Gu Du Xing, or whatever. Gu Duxing would never forget how badly Xia Danqiong had been played by his brothers on the day of the naming ceremony. As long as he replaced the Xia Danqiong of that day with himself, his heart would shudder and he would be terrified. The uncomfortable feelings in his heart needed a way to vent, and it seemed that this Wu Yun in front of him was the best tool to vent. All these unhappy feelings were caused by him. I think you should have some serious things to say. Gu Duxing pointed the tip of his sword at Wu Yun's throat. On the tip of the sword, a mass of destructive sword energy condensed into a green mass. As long as he spat it out slightly, this green sword chi would immediately enter Wu Yun's body, turning his internal organs into powder and causing his soul to scatter. Wu Yun smiled bleakly. I've killed so many people in my life and I've destroyed no less than tens of thousands of innocent families. How can I have so much to say? What else is there to do in front of the pure Sky Sword Emperor? Gu Duxing's expression became colder and colder, and his gaze became even sharper. Speak, how many people did you send this time? Wu Yun laughed mischievously. Sir Sword Emperor, you are asking the wrong person. Including the people who came, no one knows how many people came because we don't know each other. Sir Sword Emperor asked me. We also want to know the answer to this question, ha. Gu Duxing sighed in his heart and the black dragon sword rose up like clouds. Green sword chi surged out. Wu Yun's throat gurgled and he muttered, I Wu Yun am not lucky today. Suddenly he revealed a strange smile. But to be able to die in the hands of the Sword Emperor, I can be considered lucky. Before he finished his last sentence, his body had already fallen straight to the ground. Gu Duxing was silent for a moment, then he pulled out his sword and left. At the same time, Chu Yang looked at the black-robed old man who was still struggling under the attack of Chu Lure's ultimate poison. He couldn't help but say, as long as you name one person, I will give you a quick death. The old man smiled bitterly. I really want a quick death but unfortunately, I really don't even know one person. Chu Yang closed his eyes and sighed. The Calamity Sword came out and he ended it with one strike. In the second half of the night, the group of brothers all gathered in Emo Tianji's room, and everyone's expression was heavy. After this night, everyone could basically confirm that the people they found were here to cause trouble, and they had all been cleaned up. However, everyone's expression was exceptionally heavy. You didn't find anything, right? Emo Tianji looked up at the ceiling and asked softly. Everyone was silent when they heard this. Yes, more than 50 heavenly human-level experts and more than 10 saint-level experts had died in the hands of the brothers this night. And this was only the first day. Based on the strength of the cleanup operation, the success rate was 100%. Not a single person escaped the net. The operation should be considered very successful. However, the success of the operation was only the most basic requirement. Everyone had worked so hard but they had only completed the most basic requirement. Other than the success of the cleanup, they didn't gain anything else, because the targets of the attack had one thing in common. And that was, they didn't know anything. Everything was just their personal actions after receiving orders. In fact, they couldn't even tell the reason for their one-way communication. It wasn't that they didn't want to say anything, but they really couldn't say anything, or rather they didn't know what to say. Rui Badong had once used the Nirvana flame to burn a person until he was reduced to ashes. But under such extreme pain, that person broke down emotionally, cried bitterly, knelt down, begged for mercy and only asked for a quick death, but he still couldn't say anything useful. Perhaps this is the scariest part of the enemy. Emo Tianji frowned. The enemy definitely didn't just sneak in these 30 people. There are definitely some fish that escaped the net. Emo Tianji said softly, but, do you feel like you found them? Chu Yang sat on it and said indifferently, tonight Lure and I have dealt with a total of 8 people. We have a vague feeling about these people, which is that, these people may not know each other but they come from the same place. This sentence seemed contradictory but GMO and the others immediately chimed in, yes, I have that feeling too. You can't tell anything from their appearance, but once they fight, their silence and viciousness are all the same. It's as if they were born from the same mother. Emo Tianji sighed heavily. This is the situation I'm most worried about. Emo Tianji exhaled and said quietly, it finally happened. Of course they can't be born from the same mother, but their skills come from the same organization. This also proves why they don't know each other, but they are very similar in some aspects. And these people's superiors and even their superiors are all under the command of the same person. It's also because of this reason that the current situation is created. Although these people have the same goal, they have no connection with each other. They need to do their own things. If it's used in a war, it's undoubtedly a plate of loose sand, but if it's used to cause trouble in a ceremony, it's an excellent move or even the best move. Each of them has their own plans and each of them has their own way of doing things. 10 people have their own way of thinking, and 100 people have their own way of thinking. You can guard against 10 people, but can you guard against 100, 1,000 or even more? As long as one person makes a mistake and succeeds, the ascension ceremony will become a joke. Chu Yang had already realized this point, so he was frowning now. He was very resourceful, but in the face of such a chaotic situation, there were too many ways to deal with it. He really didn't have a better way to deal with it. The only thing we can do now is to continue to find these people and get rid of them. But, we must pay special attention to the feeling we have towards them while we're getting rid of them. Rely on the instincts of a martial artist to find those people who are hiding, or at least, those who don't seem to have any abnormalities on the surface. Emo Chinji said slowly, if one comes, kill one. If two comes, kill both of them. Kill as many as you can. It's better to kill the wrong person than to let them go. Chuyang was shocked when he heard this. He said, no, we can't kill the innocent. Although the current situation isn't good, we can't abandon our principles. Emo Chinji narrowed his eyes and said, we can't be sure about the enemy. For the sake of the big picture, it's inevitable to kill one or two by mistake. People who achieve great things don't restrain themselves, Chuyang said resolutely, absolutely not. We must have confidence before we attack the target. We can't kill recklessly. It seemed that this was the first time the two of them had argued. Emo Chinji lowered his head and considered carefully. After a long while, he sighed and said, then we should try our best not to hurt the innocent. Chuyang also sighed. Chuyang understood that Emo Chinji had already taken a big step back by saying this. For Emo Chinji, this ascension ceremony was simply too heavy a burden. Just adding the words can't hurt the innocent had increased Mo Chinji's workload by several times out of nowhere. This was because he had to investigate and eliminate even more meticulously. The mental and physical effort that he had to expend was at least 3 times more than before. All the brothers were expressionless, but they looked at Emo Chinji with a little gloating in their eyes. It was rare to see Emo Chinji suffer a setback. Everyone was secretly happy in their hearts, including Gu Duxing. Let's see if you can still do it. Not killing the innocent was everyone's bottom line. Although they knew that Chuyang and Emo Chinji were arguing about principles, they still felt very happy to see Emo Chinji suffer a setback. Miss Leur's poison. How's the preparation? Emo Chinji's voice softened. It's almost done. Can be used at any time in 2 days. Chu Leur lowered her eyebrows and said. Emo Tianji blurted out his praise. Well done. You're indeed the pure and intelligent Miss Leu. I can rest assured when I leave this matter to you. Unlike those incompetent fools, I have to clean up after everything they do. Chuyang looked at the sky. He rolled his eyes. Emo Chinji's words directly offended everyone indiscriminately. All the brothers were innocent. Ugh. GMO Luo Kadi and Dong Wuxiang vomited together. Chapter 2357. The muscles on Emo Tianji's face twitched. Then he put on a suave look. Now, even a hothead like Dong Wuxiang could clearly hear the flattery and ingratiation in Emo Tianji's words. If even Dong Wuxiang could hear it, how could the others not? Chu Leur's expression didn't change. It was as if she didn't hear it at all. However, a strange smile flashed in the depths of her eyes. Emo Qingwu pouted her little mouth high. It's only been a few days since we last met. How did second brother become so spineless? He actually wants to flatter this little girl. It's really a case of looking at a person in a different light. I didn't know you at all. How are the preparations for the Imperial Guards coming along? Emo Tianji asked calmly. They're almost ready. They'll come in handy in 2 days. Ao Xie replied with his chest puffed out. What do you mean by almost ready? How long has it been? You actually need 2 more days to come in handy? This progress is too slow. What the hell are you doing? Emo Tianji was furious. It's been 4 days and you're still saying that it's almost ready. A little bit is almost ready. Even 10% is almost ready. How much is your difference? Ao Xie, if something really happens to you, don't blame me for not taking our brotherhood into account. Don't forget what I said to you at the beginning. Be careful of your skin. Ao Xie was stunned. He choked on his words. What the hell? Isn't the difference too big? Chu Leur and I clearly said the same thing. Furthermore, Chu Leur only needed to prepare one person's poison. This was a field that she was absolutely familiar with. Everything was done with ease. However, I had to lead hundreds of thousands of Imperial Guards. Furthermore, I didn't know them at all. From familiarizing myself with them to getting used to them, it only took a short 4 days. This efficiency can't be considered slow, right? I basically didn't even have time to breathe in these 4 days. I even had to hold my bladder. I didn't expect to be scolded by Emo Tianji. Ao Xie was so angry that he almost lost control of his bladder. Chu Leur said that she would receive an undisguised commendation in 2 days. However, he said that he would be skinned in 2 days? You, Emo Tianji, favor one and discriminate against the other too much. It's fine if you favor one and discriminate against the other. But aren't you being too obvious about it? Even if he valued love over friendship, shouldn't he have some sense of propriety? This was too much. Mo Tianji didn't care about Ao Xieyun's expression. He turned his head and asked GMO, "What about you?" GMO said with fear and trepidation, "It's almost done. My side is really almost done. 2 more days. Oh, don't scold me. I'll work overtime tonight. It definitely won't take 2 more days." Seeing Mo Tianji raise his eyebrows, GMO didn't say anything and immediately begged for mercy. "Qing Wu." Mo Tianji frowned and turned around. Mo Qing Wu curled her lips and said, "I'm almost done. I can finish my preparations in 2 days' time." Mo Tianji sighed. "You're still too slow. Look at Miss Lur. You have to learn from her." "Stop, where are you going?" He hadn't even finished speaking when he saw Mo Qing Wu angrily shake her head and stride out of the door. "I'm so angry, so angry." Mo Qing Wu stomped her feet fiercely. After a while the meeting was over. Chuler walked out slowly and stopped in front of Mo Qing Wu. She said lightly, "You're really too slow. Remember to learn from me. If you don't know anything, just let me know. I'll guide you." After saying that, she walked out proudly with her head held high. Hearing that, Mo Qing Wu stomped her feet fiercely. A deep crack appeared under her feet. This little girl was so pleased with herself that she forgot her place. Mo Qing Wu cursed angrily in her heart. In the next few days, Chu Yang and the others were like spinning tops that didn't rest at all. They didn't even have the slightest bit of time to rest. They shuttled back and forth in the city at any time. In addition, they had to be prepared to receive Mo Tianji's orders to kill and interrogate. The guards of the imperial city patrolled the streets at any time and drove the carriages. Once there was any abnormality, they would immediately rush over to solve it. The things that were solved were mostly corpses being dragged out from the inns or houses. They were loaded onto the carriages and pulled away. At first, they thought that this should be a very easy job. How could there be too many dead people before the ceremony? How inauspicious. But as more and more corpses were dragged out, the officers of the imperial city guards also started to complain incessantly. How could there be so many? And they were so scattered in the east, west, south and north of the city, everywhere, outside the city gates at the mass grave. A group of people of the martial world looked at the corpses that were strewn everywhere, their mouths agape. The guards transported the corpses here in waves. And among these corpses, even the one with the lowest cultivation when he was alive was a famous expert in the martial world. There were even many corpses of saint-level experts. But there was one thing in common. These people were either lone thieves or lone killers when they were alive, or they were lone travelers who roamed the martial world by themselves. In short, none of them had a certain background. Among these experts, there were experts from the Ink Cloud Sky, Demon Emperor Sky, and Eastern Royal Sky. Judging from the date and route, these people should have set off immediately after receiving the news of Jade Flower Emperor's ascension. They rushed all the way, but they didn't expect that after they reached Ink Cloud Sky at the first moment, they would immediately die here. It was as if they had specially rushed here to die. How could such a strange thing happen? Could it be that these experts of the martial world had traveled such a long distance, almost risking their lives to rush here just to die in Ink Cloud Sky? And who had such great ability to lure all these experts from all over the world here and then catch them all in one fell swoop? Many people of the martial world looked at the corpses of experts who were more famous than the previous one in the mass grave, and all of them shuddered. From afar, the sound of wheels could be heard again. Another carriage was driven over by the guards. On top of it, there were 3 corpses lying crookedly. To the people of the martial world who were surrounding them, these soldiers turned a blind eye and just shouted casually, "Make way, make way. Don't block the way." Isn't it the same to look at it after putting it down? What's the hurry? They actually did not hide it at all and did not block it. These are all thieves who came with the intention of disrupting Jade Flower Emperor's ascension ceremony. They are the great enemies of the entire Ink Cloud Sky. After being killed by us, their corpses were all exposed in the wilderness. You all must take this as a warning. Looking at the carriage rumbling away, everyone was discussing spiritedly. So they are all thieves who came to cause trouble. This bunch of people really have guts. Ink Cloud Sky trusted the Sky Emperor's ascension ceremony and actually dared to come and cause trouble. Isn't this courting death? So they are all dead now, but so many people from all over the world came to cause trouble together. This matter seems very strange. Isn't that so? Who has such great power to be able to order so many experts to come together at the same time? What great power? Why must it be someone who ordered them? Couldn't they come on their own accord? Desuke, I said you are a pighead and you really became a pig. Disrupting the ascension ceremony, if they have a grudge against Jade Flower Emperor, then it is pardonable, at least it can be explained. But, first, with so many people, could it be that everyone has a grudge against Jade Flower Emperor? Secondly, Jade Flower Emperor has just risen recently, and they have never heard of his name before. Where did so much hatred come from? Furthermore, these people are from all over the world and belong to different worlds. Jade Flower Emperor had already exhausted his mind just dealing with the heavenly demons previously. Where would he have the time and interest to provoke so many enemies? So with one look, it is obvious that this matter is instigated by someone. That makes sense, but who is the one who instigated it? That I don't know. Anyway, it is someone with great power, haha. To have the qualifications to be jealous and have such great power, and the qualifications to disrupt Jade Flower Emperor's ascension ceremony, I believe that he is definitely not ordinary. Nonsense, that's pure nonsense. Is it possible that it's one of the other majesties? This is a matter of opinion. Could it be someone higher up? They lowered their voices. I don't understand what you are talking about. Then why? I heard that person once publicly declared that he is not a heavenly demon. I see. Brother, you are wise. What did I say? I clearly didn't say anything. Slowly, Jade Flower City was filled with all kinds of guesses. After all, so many people had died at once and they were all experts at that. Regardless of whether it was the Moyan Sky government or the pugilistic world, it was a huge blow. If someone said that there was nothing fishy about this matter, no one would believe it even if they were beaten to death. However, the problem was that so many people had died but not a single victim had come to ask for an explanation. This matter was even weirder. One or two of them were loners and that made sense. The pugilistic world had no lack of loners, but everyone was loners and all of them were loners. That didn't seem to make sense. How could so many people have died and not a single one of them had a family? How many people like this have died by now? I don't know, but it is definitely not a small number already. Then how many more have died? I don't know, but it is definitely not a small number. But these people don't have any victims. Every single one of them is a loner? Isn't this too much of a coincidence? That's right. This matter is indeed strange. If such a group of people were scattered in the tens of thousands of domains in the Heaven Imperial Court, they would naturally be inconspicuous. However, a large number of them had suddenly gathered in the Moyan Sky, and all of them were gathered in Jade Flower City. That was too strange. After such suspicions had sprouted, the Moyan Sky government suddenly started a new action. Chapter 2358. Of course, it's also possible that they have too many people on their side. Even if tens of millions of people die, it's just a drizzle. It doesn't matter. That's also possible. Nothing is too strange in this world. Suddenly Emotianji pretended to be relaxed and laughed out loud. However, his laughter was full of bitterness and bitterness. Chuyang shook his head. His face was heavy. Emotianji's words were obviously a joke. This was certainly a possibility. However, it was an absolutely impossible possibility. He believed that no matter what power those people belonged to, they wouldn't be willing to give up such a powerful force. In the clouds. In a place that couldn't be seen with the naked eye, a white cloud was floating. It was sometimes east and sometimes west, sometimes left and sometimes right. On the white cloud, a man in white was sitting cross-legged. He had a dignified face and thick eyebrows. When he opened and closed his eyes, it was like thunder. However, in a flash his body would dissipate. He would turn into a cloud and blend into the surrounding dense fog. Then, in a flash he would appear on top of the cloud and sit upright. Just like this, he would appear and disappear in a cycle. If there were a few people with high authority in the Heavenly Imperial Court here, they would definitely exclaim, "Saint!" This person was the saint himself. At this moment, there seemed to be countless thin lines appearing between his fingers. It was as if every ray of sunlight was passing through his fingertips. Suddenly one of the lines broke. An unusually abundant energy slowly rose from the broken line and entered his finger. When the energy completely entered his finger, the broken line would also disappear without a trace. It was as if it had never existed. Another one has died. The sage let out a sigh of relief. After millions of years of painstaking effort, it's finally time to reap the rewards. The saint's dignified face revealed a slight smile. He looked at the threads in his hand, which were constantly breaking and falling. Energy was constantly rising, and energy was constantly entering his body out of thin air, transforming into his own pure cultivation. There was no distinction between the two of them. Whether it was physically or mentally, it was a kind of extreme comfort. However, the sage's face remained tranquil from beginning to end, like an ancient well without any ripples. Only a cultivator who has reached the celestial level or above can produce this kind of dark magic power. Moreover, it had to be when facing an opponent with true hatred and death in a fierce battle. Only then would this special magical power be produced. Although I had expected such an effect long ago, but, in the end it wasn't much. These people are really muddle-headed. To think that some of them would sympathize with the people who killed them. How stupid. Just because of this bit of mutual appreciation, how much dark spirit energy was reduced to nothingness just like that. What a waste. Presently, there are already more than 10,000 people that have arrived here, and more than 7,000 have been confirmed dead. That strategist in Jasper Flower City is indeed not simple, and he's actually not inferior to Wan Linglong. These two people can be said to be shining one after the other, but I wonder who's better. However, I believe you won't be able to discover those four people. As long as one of those four people is still alive, he will be able to attack Xie Dan Xiong during his ascension ceremony. Then this so-called ascension ceremony will only be a joke. Will be a complete joke. Since the beginning of time, the first celestial emperor of the heavenly imperial court will be born. As for the others, if you can kill them, then kill them. This can also be considered as benefiting others. Sai, in these millions of years, how much dark spirit energy has been produced in total? The cultivation method of the villa still has room for improvement, especially those who died before reaching the celestial level. There are really too many of them. It's too wasteful. Those who are dead are completely useless. It's really too wasteful. I only hope that the commander-in-chief of Jasper Flower City this time won't disappoint me too much. A faint smile appeared on the saint's face. I'm really looking forward to your wisdom. In fact, the current situation has already somewhat exceeded my expectations. However, this is just right. The more powerful you are, the more ideal it will be. Do your best, Jasper Flower Emperors, brothers. A trace of a smile appeared on the saint's face as he looked down, full of expectations. If one followed his line of sight and looked down, the place he was looking at was precisely a small courtyard on the ground. Inside the small courtyard there was a study. The saint's gaze had long been fixed on this study. He didn't know who exactly the person in the study was, but he could clearly feel that all the orders were issued from here. This was the key, the place where the pivot was located. Chu Yang had just left Mo Tianji's place, but he left Chu Lu'er behind. He could feel it. Mo Tianji's heart was as heavy as a mountain. At such a moment, no one could help Mo Tianji. Chu Yang was a little worried. Therefore, he left Chu Lu'er behind to take care of Mo Tianji. Chu Lu'er was the disciple of the poison doctor Wu Jucheng. She was absolutely unparalleled in the use of poison. One must know that Wu Jucheng's nickname also had the word doctor. To be able to be nicknamed the poison doctor, not only was he unparalleled in the use of poison, but he was also very good at nourishing the human body. Before Chu Yang left, he had solemnly instructed Chu Lu, once you discover that Mo Tianji is in a state of overdraft, immediately stop. Also, pay attention to the nourishment of Mo Tianji's body at all times. Chu Lu solemnly agreed and resolutely carried it out. At this moment, Mo Tianji, who was sorting out the information in the study and doing his best to find those suspicious people, suddenly felt a chill down his spine. It was as if he felt a pair of eyes quietly watching him. This thought was actually very real. Mo Tianji couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. Then he suddenly raised his head and looked outside the door. As far as his eyes could see, there was nothing unusual. Hundreds of thoughts flashed through his mind, but he still couldn't figure out what exactly went wrong. His mind was in a mess and he was extremely conflicted. After a long time, Mo Tianji finally sorted out his thoughts. He stood up and slowly walked out of the door. Looking up at the sky, his handsome eyebrows slowly furrowed as he muttered, "Who are you?" The sky was speechless. Above his head, there were only idle white clouds floating around. In an instant they turned into nothingness and then slowly floated back again. Everything was normal. There was no difference at all. Chu Lu'er looked at Mo Tianji's strange behavior and couldn't help but ask curiously, "What's wrong? Did something happen?" "Nothing." Mo Tianji shook his head and said, "Just now I seemed to feel that someone was watching me. But this place is filled with the tight encirclement of the divine senses of many saints. No one can see through it. But it's precisely because of this that I feel strange. Chu Lur said softly, perhaps it's because you've been working too hard and are too tired? That's why you're hallucinating? Mo Tianji quietly closed his eyes and sensed for a long time. Then he slowly opened his eyes and smiled gently, perhaps. Then he said, Miss Lur, please go and see what your big brother is doing. If he's free, please ask him to come to me as soon as possible. Okay. Chu Lur was unusually sensitive to the seriousness of the matter in front of her. She said, I'll go now. Her delicate figure flashed and instantly disappeared without a trace. After Chu Lur found Chu Yang and told him, Chu Yang didn't delay for a moment and rushed back like a gust of wind. He knew Mo Tianji's temperament very well. He had just left his place, but Mo Tianji still wanted to find him back. Something big must have happened. Otherwise Mo Tianji definitely wouldn't do this. However, what could make Mo Tianji so anxious that he had to find him in such a hurry? Chu Yang rushed back like a gust of wind and saw Mo Tianji walking back and forth in the courtyard with his hands behind his back. When he saw Chu Yang, Mo Tianji didn't say anything and pulled Chu Yang into the room. What's the matter? Chu Yang asked seriously. Someone's watching me. Mo Tianji's face darkened as he transmitted his voice. As he said that, he secretly pointed to the top of his head with his finger. Are you sure? Chu Yang's face changed as he transmitted his voice. Mo Tianji pondered for a moment. There's only a 30% chance that I'm sure. In the past few days I've sensed it many times, but I didn't take it to heart. However, until this time his gaze stayed on me for a little longer. That feeling can't be wrong. There must be some mysterious force watching from the side. Chu Yang's face became serious. Someone's watching. The matter expressed in this sentence was simply too big. The entire Cheonghua city was still gradually increasing the coverage of the divine senses of the 100 saints. In addition, there was also the divine sense of the calamity guarding at all times. There was also the divine senses of the 2 Demon Emperor Heaven's 7-star guards. There was also Mo Tianji's own divine sense defense. What kind of person's gaze could not alarm all of this and directly lock onto Mo Tianji in the center? What kind of cultivation would such a person have? Wouldn't such a person be extremely terrifying? There's only a 30% chance that I'm sure. Chu Yang muttered. 30% was what Mo Tianji said. The probability was really not high. However, in Chu Yang's view, with Mo Tianji's cautious personality, if he said 30%, it was basically 50%. 50% was already very terrifying. However, Chu Yang still wanted to confirm it, and Mo Tianji also had the same plan. This was not a joke. They had to be absolutely sure. Mo Tianji had been racking his brains during this period of time and was also worried that his senses were wrong. In the entire plan, if there was an unknown enemy with such terrifying strength, Mo Tianji would rather his senses be wrong. In the entire world, the only person who could help Mo Tianji make a judgment was Chu Yang. Next, I need you to sit here. Mo Tianji pointed at his chair. Do the work I left behind. As for me, I'll be your assistant. Once we're sure that someone is watching from the side, we'll have to reconsider our entire plan, Mo Tianji said seriously. Chu Yang could clearly see that there was a blue vein on Mo Tianji's forehead. Chapter 2359. Chu Yang understood the meaning of this sentence very well. The plan had to be reconsidered. It didn't mean that it had to be completely overturned, but it had to be carefully studied. What should he study? If this person could lock onto Mo Tianji and spy on him more than once, then he must be very interested in Mo Tianji's current operation. Otherwise he wouldn't have done this. And the people who should be paying the most attention to Mo Tianji now were undoubtedly the forces behind those mysterious assassins. All the orders and operations here were aimed at sniping those people. All the operations started from here. Judging from this person's strength, if he wanted to stop them, he could probably stop them every time. But he never stopped them. Why was that? Why did he just watch as those people were killed? What? This time it was different from the discussion between the two of them previously. Their discussion was just a discussion without any evidence. But now, it was equivalent to having indirect evidence. The things contained in this were too meaningful. Chu Yang immediately accepted Mo Tianji's proposal. Then he sat down on Mo Tianji's seat. Then the aura of his entire body changed. In fact, he had turned into the king of Hell Chu of the past. His hands were still methodically issuing commands like moving clouds and flowing water. Every command was sent out by Mo Tianji's hands. There wasn't the slightest bit of chaos. Even the speed was not much different from Mo Tianji's original speed. Chu Lur, who was waiting outside the door, didn't even realize that the person giving out orders had changed to another person. It was just as accurate, just as fast, just as straight to the point, and just as swift as the wind. As Mo Tianji gave out orders, he cursed inwardly in a manner that didn't match the environment and the situation. This bastard is usually just lazy. This is my job, but this guy can actually do it alone. This time, under extreme pressure, he finally showed his true colors. To think that he hid his abilities in front of me for such a long time. No, rather than hiding his abilities, he was basically slacking off. He's too hateful. Come to think of it, if Chu Yang and Mo Tianji were to be considered solely in the aspect of cognition and discernment, the two of them were actually about the same level. However, when it came to arranging troops and setting up battle formations, determining victory from 1,000 miles away, or taking advantage of the enemy's opportunities and devising strategies, Chu Yang was somewhat inferior. As for divination, the advance and retreat of an army of 10,000 horses, grasping opportunities at any time, formations, astrology, the 5 elements, the 8 trigrams, and so on, these were all Mo Tianji's personal domain. Chu Yang couldn't be said to be completely ignorant of these, but his knowledge was rather limited. There was no comparison between the two. However, Chu Yang was not inferior to Mo Tianji in this aspect. In fact, he was even better than Mo Tianji. Just like, when he was catching spies in Iron Cloud, and now he was merely repeating the situation from that time. Naturally, he was very familiar with the road. After Chu Yang took over, he didn't panic at all. The entire afternoon passed, and the orders were issued smoothly like flowing water. He didn't have the strange feeling of being spied on. This result made Mo Tianji somewhat surprised. Could it be that his intuition was wrong? Why did it suddenly disappear? In such a long period of time, it had already appeared a few times. If his intuition was wrong, then this time it would be too big of a joke. This situation continued all the way until it was time to light the lamps, but there was still no abnormality. As Chu Yang methodically issued orders, he frowned and thought about something. Mo Tianji suddenly opened his eyes wide and stared blankly at Chu Yang. His face was filled with disbelief and disbelief. Because just now, Chu Yang suddenly issued 7 or 8 orders in a row. Giving out 7 or 8 orders in a row was naturally nothing strange. In such a high-intensity work process, not to mention 7 or 8 orders, even 17 or 18 orders in a row was nothing. The reason why Mo Tianji was so surprised was because these orders that Chu Yang issued were all wrong. Perhaps it couldn't be said that the orders were wrong because those orders could still be executed, but the contents of those orders were quite ridiculous. This made Mo Tianji, who was in charge of passing down orders, confused. Why would Chu Yang order to attack GMO and Mu Tsanglan? Also, Dong Wuxiang and Gu Duxing went to find the calligraphy and painting kings for a battle. He ordered Luo Kadi to go to the J Institute. This guy couldn't have broken down because he hadn't worked so hard for a long time and couldn't get used to it, right? But in the next moment, Mo Tianji already understood Chu Yang's intention. Because, following the appearance of the wrong orders, and when the third order was issued, the two of them simultaneously felt a chill run down their spines. This was the benefit of being a top martial artist in a life-and-death situation for a long time. Being in an atmosphere of danger for a long time, as well as being tempered by life-and-death situations, could cultivate this almost miraculous feeling. In the darkness, there was a pair of eyes looking at them with astonishment. As the master of Calamity Sword who had been rolling in front of hell for a long time, Chu Yang's intuition was definitely stronger than Mo Tianji's on this point. At this moment he felt the hair on the back of his neck standing straight up. There was absolutely no mistake. There was indeed someone spying on everything here. Sure enough, they came. Since he had already confirmed what he wanted to know, he naturally had to correct some mistakes. Thus, Chu Yang issued 8 more orders in a row, canceling the previous ridiculous orders. However, he still didn't issue the killing order. He only ordered GMO, who was preparing to cause trouble for Mu Tsanglan, to retreat and wait for orders. At the same time, he ordered Dong Wuxiang and the others to cancel their original plan. However, he didn't issue any further orders. That feeling didn't disappear immediately. Instead, it became even more intense. It was obvious that someone was observing him, and as he watched, he was also pondering the meaning of his series of actions. This was probably just a little bit of attention. It didn't have the ability to distinguish. Thus, that mysterious person didn't know that the person in this room had actually changed. Thus, Chu Yang's deliberately erroneous orders made people feel surprised. With that person's understanding of the commander-in-chief in this room, he definitely shouldn't have made such a low-level mistake. This commander-in-chief's brain was practically an all-encompassing yet extremely precise machine. There definitely wouldn't be any careless mistakes. Therefore, the current phenomenon caused the mental power to stay here for a little longer. It was just that this observation exceeded the extremely short period of time usually. Suddenly, someone outside shouted, "Who's there?" The next moment, two figures shot straight into the sky like shooting stars. In addition, a gray fog also shot up like lightning. It was the two great guards of Demon Emperor Heaven and the Divine Soul of Calamity. They had already discovered the person spying on the other side. However, after the three peak forces shot up into the sky, they didn't discover anything. As far as their eyes could see, there was only an empty sky. White clouds came and went freely. That was all. Not only was there no one, there wasn't even a bird. In addition, that feeling also disappeared immediately. Jianghu stopped. His expression was solemn and serious. "Qinji, the person you were talking about really exists." Qinji's expression was very ugly. He nodded. "Indeed. His actions are really very strange. He's actually waiting for us to kill. Moreover, he's even allowing us to kill his people. I don't know why, but I suddenly had a strong feeling just now, he's actually not against us killing his people at all. In fact, the more we kill, the better." Chu Yang and Qinji exchanged a look. They both saw a hint of fear in each other's eyes, as well as a hint of dejection. If the other party had specially sent people to die, then wouldn't they be playing right into the other party's hands by sending out so many orders of death previously? However, the other party had sent out so many strong experts to cause trouble. They didn't kill. How could they? Were they supposed to just let them ruin the ceremony? Leave them be. Then Xie Danxiong would certainly lose all face, and Brother Jia wouldn't be able to show his face anymore. However, in the face of such a situation, what should they do? Capture but not kill? When Tianji said these words, he paused after each word. It seemed as if he had used up a lot of energy to say each word. Chu Yang smiled bitterly. "How likely, do you think it is?" Tianji sighed dejectedly. Capturing but not killing was perhaps the most effective strategy for the current situation. Capture and wait for the enemy to follow up. If it was proven that they were just worrying for nothing, then it wouldn't be a problem to kill them all. However, the feasibility of implementing it was too low. It was easier said than done. Four martial artists with profound strength, capturing alive and killing were two completely different concepts. The degree of difficulty between the two could be 2 times, 10 times, or even 100 times. After confirming the target, their strength was higher than the other party's to begin with. Moreover, they were attacking when the other party was unprepared. Naturally, killing the target was a relatively simple matter. They just had to fight with all their strength to ensure that the other party had no way out. However, capturing alive wasn't that simple. Who didn't have life-saving means for such solo experts? It was fine if they were killed in a battle. However, as long as the initial goal wasn't to kill but to capture alive, then they would definitely have scruples. With apprehension, there would be many flaws that would appear. As long as there was a slight gap, such experts would have plenty of opportunities to escape. However, because you couldn't kill them directly, you could only use a relatively gentle method of capturing them alive. In that case, the difficulty was undoubtedly much higher. For example, if Chu Yang and GMO were to compare their cultivations, Chu Yang would be 100% sure that he could kill GMO in a life-and-death battle. But, if one were to talk about capturing GMO alive, Chu Yang would become 100% uncertain. This was the difference. Even if it was only against enemies at the peak of the celestial being level, the Tribulation Brothers who had the strength of a saint still didn't have much confidence in capturing alive. This was the difference. Even enemies at the celestial being level were so difficult, let alone enemies at the saint level. If you really make such a decision, you will definitely drive the brothers crazy. If you're not careful, even we will be in danger. The loss outweighs the gain. Chu Yang smiled bitterly. Today is Cold Moon Tsang, old teacher Tsang's birthday. Let's wish teacher Tsang a happy birthday. I'll give everyone a suggestion. Everyone shout in the book review section, "Happy birthday, old teacher Tsang. Come back and film another movie, then we'll all go to the top." Chapter 2360. He had never seen Tianji so tired. Tianji's anger had yet to subside. He snorted heavily. However, the people in front of him had already left, so he couldn't get angry anymore. He was about to return to his room when he saw dull-head Dong Wuxiang coming back with a whoosh. He carelessly stuffed a bottle into Tianji's arms and said, "I almost forgot. This is a ginseng spirit that I obtained by chance. It's said that it's useful for those who are scheming. After Dong Wuxiang finished speaking, he chuckled and disappeared with a whoosh. Mo Tianji's chest was suddenly attacked by a man. He couldn't help but be startled. Before he could react, a whoosh sound was heard. Gu Duxing was standing on the wall. He said coldly, Mo Tianji, don't die of exhaustion. I am not interested in wearing morning clothes. He disappeared in a flash. Mo Tianji reached out and grabbed the thing. He looked at it carefully and realized that it was a Saint Soul calming pill. It was used to regulate mental stress. It could make people's thoughts more sensitive. It was an unorthodox pill. Without a doubt, this was a kind of top-grade elixir. It was said that only the Zishao Heavenly Emperor had refined it. Since the fall of the Zihao Heavenly Emperor, this elixir had become extinct. Although Chu Yang, who had inherited the Zihao Heavenly Emperor, had the ability to refine it, this elixir was obtained by Gu Duxing by chance. Chu Yang didn't have the time to refine it. After all, Chu Yang didn't have enough time to refine elixirs for cultivation and recovery. He really didn't have the time to refine such an unorthodox elixir. Mo Tianji held this top-quality panacea in his hand, and for a moment he was filled with a myriad of emotions. He was stunned. Mo Tianji was still sighing with emotion when he heard a loud scolding from outside. Mo Tianji, if you're tired, just eat a pear. Do you really want to tire yourself to death and earn the warm tears of our men? I won't cry if you die. Why are you always so stubborn? What are you doing? Then a big bag of pears flew in. Someone outside said unhappily, do you know how to talk? You're the bird. It was Rui Budong's voice. Then another bag of snacks flew in, followed by a sentence, I'm really busy these days. When I'm free, I'll specially steal some things to make up for your brain, so that you don't die of exhaustion. It doesn't matter if you die, but if your position is empty, they'll hit me again. Things flew in one after another, and the brothers laughed and joked as they left. Mo Tianji, who was about to get angry a moment ago and then sighed with emotion, returned to being dumbstruck. He couldn't help but feel a little sour in his eyes. He forced himself to chuckle and said, looks like these guys are still too idle. They actually have the time to play with these things. Since they still have the time to think about other things, then I'll give them more to help me relieve some stress. Aha. The last two laughs were actually trembling. Chu Yang squinted his eyes. Then he casually put down a bottle of heavy pills. Okay. You can go and increase the stakes. I'll also go and do other things. There are some things that you can't bear to eat like a miser. Mo Tianji pretended to be angry and waved his hand. I know better than you. Get lost, get lost. Then he strode into the house. Of course, he didn't forget to take away the bottle of heavy pills. Not long after, when Chu Le went in to receive the task order, she only saw Mo Tianji with a smile and satisfaction. He was hugging a pear and gnawing on it. The juice flowed out and he didn't care about his image at all. His eyes were narrowed into slits. To Mo Tianji, this image was simply indescribable to the extreme. And this glorious image was coincidentally seen by Chu Le. It could be seen that Mo Tianji's generation was definitely going to fall in someone's hands after the heavens entered the path. Seeing Chu Le come in, Mo Tianji was immediately embarrassed. He hurriedly put down the pear and pretended to be serious as he arranged the task. In his heart, he was deeply regretting his loss of composure just now. But who knew that in Chu Le's heart, Mo Tianji's satisfied and gratified look when he was hugging the pear just now was so beautiful. It turned out that this machine-like person also had such natural feelings and knew how to be moved. It was just that he usually hid it too well and never took the initiative to show it. Just now, when he was hugging and gnawing on the pear that was half the size of his head, he really looked like a child who hadn't eaten a pear for a long time. He tasted the sweetness with a face full of bliss. This Mo Tianji was really cute. If the brothers knew that Chu Le's evaluation of Mo Tianji was actually like this, they would definitely faint. So cute. How could this evaluation be related to Mo Tianji? Of course, it didn't matter whether it was related or not. Chu Le thought so anyway. Chu Le was originally a mischievous child. How could she not know Mo Tianji's feelings? But she had an inexplicable sense of panic earlier. Mo Tianji was too scheming. He didn't reveal anything. This made Chu Le a little dissatisfied and a little angry. It's fine if you're scheming in other things, but you don't reveal anything when you're chasing a girl. Are you waiting for the girl to confess to you? If you, Mo Tianji, don't say anything, then I won't say anything even if I die. This was a kind of restraint and self-esteem that belonged to a girl. And Mo Tianji was always worried about personal gains and losses. In this aspect, he lost a lot of opportunities. So, brothers, when you see a girl you like, you have to bravely move forward. Regardless of whether she accepts you or not, you have to confess to her first. After confessing, you will have a change of mindset of, a dead pig is not afraid of boiling water. Anyway, you already know, so what else do I have to worry about? So, you have to go forward bravely. Remember, being careful, bold, and thick-skinned are the three main elements of chasing a girl. Of course, being thick-skinned is the most important. Back then, actually, I was the one being chased. Pretend I didn't say anything above. Over the next 2 days, the number of spies they killed increased by quite a bit. However, this time, everyone was more cautious. Finally, on this night, all the brothers gathered at Mo Tianji's side. When Tribulation gathered, he was surprised to find that there were more people in addition to Tribulation and his brother. Zi Sheqing, the calligraphy and painting kings, the two great guards of Demon Emperor Heaven, Yao Ningning, Mu Tsanglan, and the others were all present. Other than the living people with normal images, there was also a formless soul of a calamity hiding at the side. Mo Tianji gave an order when he saw that everyone had arrived. Then, everyone spread out their spiritual sense without any reservation. And they covered this small courtyard tightly. This time it was different from before. It was done with the full strength of more than 40 saint experts. Unless one's cultivation was stronger than the sum of the 40 saint experts, it was impossible to eavesdrop on the conversation inside. But according to the current information, such a person had never appeared in the Heaven Palace. Absolutely never. Even the number one saint in the Heaven Imperial Court was far from the sum of the power of these 40 experts. Did you find anything specific? Mo Tianji took a deep breath and asked. All the souls of the dead have dissipated. It's equivalent to their souls dissipating. Gu Duxing said. It's the same on my side. Dong Wuxiang agreed. Me too. I was still wondering. The souls of such experts are usually very condensed. As long as they don't destroy it deliberately, they will instinctively find a way to survive. I didn't destroy it deliberately, so how did it disappear into thin air? It turns out that everyone's situation is the same. GMO said. I have a different opinion. Chu Yang said solemnly, the so-called dissipation of soul power is indeed the disappearance of the process. But the reason why it disappears is because the little bit of true spirit is gone. It lacks the most basic foundation for the existence of the original spirit. That's why it's actively dissipating. Oh, for the original soul to not dissipate and even to be reborn, the most important thing is not the strength of the soul body, but the strength of the soul power. If the soul power is gone, once the physical body is destroyed, the soul power will naturally dissipate. In other words, the core of those people's souls is long gone. Without exception, this is the case for all of them. In fact, when a person is reincarnated, what they rely on is the soul power. This is what all living beings rely on. If it's not destroyed by external forces, it won't disappear naturally. This is the case for ordinary people, let alone those experts who can dominate a region. The crux of the problem has been found, but this crux of the problem is indeed even more strange and difficult to understand. Can the soul power not exist in the body but somewhere else? Chu Yang looked around. So today I've invited all of you to gather here. Since all of you are so knowledgeable, perhaps you can help us understand what's going on. Everyone looked at each other. Then Chu Yang told them everything that had happened during this period of time. Apart from the fact that the soul power doesn't exist in the physical body, these people have many similarities. They all come from the same place. This point can be confirmed without a doubt. Their cultivation is also very similar. After explaining everything, Mu Tsanglan and the others were still confused and didn't give any relevant suggestions. Only the King of Books looked pensive, as if he had sunk into some deep memory. Seeing this, everyone shut up automatically and didn't dare to disturb him. After a long time, the King of Books finally raised his head and said with uncertainty, Could it be that back then, as soon as the King of Books said this, the King of Paintings and Yao Huangtian's expressions changed greatly? As if they had thought of something, they said in shock, You mean, that kind of martial art back then, has reappeared in the world? The King of Books frowned. If we speculate according to the various signs now, it's indeed suspicious. There's a place that nurtures countless experts and allows them to grow freely in the martial world. In fact, a sacred poison has been planted in their hearts long ago. There's a person who controls everyone's soul power. Once the person's cultivation reaches the heavenly being level or above, after his death, the soul power will be decomposed along with the sacred poison and become the purest spiritual power in the world, returning to the controller. Chapter 2361. Me too. I found it strange that the soul power of such experts is usually very condensed. As long as they don't deliberately destroy it, they will basically instinctively look for a chance of survival, such as taking over someone else's body for rebirth. I didn't deliberately destroy it, so how could it disappear into thin air? It turns out that the situation is the same for everyone. GMO said. I have a slightly different opinion. Chu Yang said solemnly, the so-called dissipation of the soul power is indeed the disappearance of the process. But the reason why it disappears is that the little bit of the true spirit is gone. It lacks the most basic foundation for the existence of the original spirit, which leads to such a situation of dissipation. Oh, the most important thing for the original spirit to not dissipate and even take over someone else's body for rebirth is not the strength of the soul body, but the strength of the little bit of true spirit. If the little bit of true spirit doesn't exist, once the body is destroyed, the soul power will naturally dissipate. In other words, the core of those people's souls has long disappeared. Without exception, this is the case for all of them. In fact, what a person relies on when he is reincarnated is that little bit of true spirit. This is originally the support of all living beings given by heaven and earth. If it is not destroyed by external forces, it will definitely not disappear naturally. This is the case for ordinary people, let alone those experts who are strong enough to dominate a region. The crux of the problem has been found, but the crux of the problem is indeed very strange and difficult to understand. Can a person's true spirit not exist in the body, but in another place? Chu Yang looked around. So today I have invited all of you to gather here. You are all very knowledgeable, so perhaps you can help us to understand what is going on. Everyone looked at each other. Then, Chu Yang narrated everything that had happened during this period of time. In addition to the fact that these people's true spirits do not exist in their bodies, there are many similarities. They all come from the same place. This point can be confirmed without a doubt. Their cultivations are also very similar. After explaining this and that, Mu Tsanglan and the others were still confused and did not give any relevant suggestions. Only the King of Books looked thoughtful, as if he had sunk into some deep memories. Seeing this, everyone automatically shut up and did not dare to disturb. After a long time, the King of Books finally raised his head and said with uncertainty, "Could it be? Could it really be?" As soon as the Book King said that, the Painting King and Yao Huangtian's expressions changed drastically. They seemed to have thought of something and said in shock, "You mean, that kind of martial arts from back then, has reappeared in the world?" The King of Books frowned and said, "According to the evidence we have, there is indeed such a suspicion. There is a place that cultivates countless superior cultivators and allows them to grow freely in the martial world. In fact, a holy poison has been planted in their hearts and a person is controlling their souls. Once the controlled person reaches the heavenly being level, his soul will be decomposed by the holy poison after he dies. It will become the purest spiritual power in the world and return to the controller. The purest form of magic power. Nether spirit magic power." The Painting King cried out in alarm, his face deathly pale. Not only him, but the two guards of the Demon Emperor Sky and Mu Tsanglan also turned pale when they heard this. Their bodies were actually trembling. Several people looked at each other and in unison they blurted out 4 words, "Myriad Saints True Spirit?" Someone's voice was actually trembling. "Impossible. Absolutely impossible." Mu Tsanglan cried out in a trembling voice, "That Myriad Saints Demon Monarch has already died in the hands of the Saint Lord. That demonic martial art has also been destroyed by the Saint Lord. It is absolutely impossible." As soon as he finished speaking, Chu Yang and Mo Tianji and the rest turned their heads. Dozens of gazes pierced Mu Tsanglan's face like dozens of sharp swords. Chu Yang's eyes lit up. Myriad Saints True Spirit? Killed by the Saint Lord? Destroyed by the Saint Lord? May I ask, what exactly is that Myriad Saints True Spirit? Mo Tianji let out a sigh of relief. Myriad Saints True Spirit, I, the unique supreme. The Book King swallowed his saliva and said these words. His eyes revealed a look of heartfelt fear. "I would like to hear the details." Mo Tianji smiled gently. The so-called 10,000 Saints True Spirit is definitely not just empty talk. Instead it is, anyone who has mastered this martial art will be able to become the most powerful person in the entire martial world with ease. It will not be a problem at all. Because of this, cultivators of the Myriad Saints True Spirit martial art are considered the public enemy of all martial artists. Once someone is found to be cultivating this martial art, everyone will be in danger and will attack until the person is dead. Xu Kuang took a deep breath and suppressed the shock in his heart. He said slowly, Myriad Saint's true spirit is a public hazard in the martial world. If it is not removed as soon as possible, everyone in the martial world will not be able to eat or sleep well. He paused and his voice turned serious. He said word by word, even super experts like Di Ho are no exception. Chu Yang frowned and said, this Myriad Saint's true spirit is so scary. But what is so scary about it? Senior, please explain in detail. Following Chu Yang's question, everyone looked at Xu Kuang. A few people praised him in their hearts. This question was really timely. Clearly, Chu Yang wanted Xu Kuang to explain the origin of this martial art and its danger for everyone to hear. And at this time, Chu Yang played the role of throwing a brick to attract jade in a timely manner. He asked what everyone wanted to ask in advance to avoid embarrassment. The literal meaning of Myriad Saint's true spirit is that even if there are millions of saints, there is only one true spirit. In other words, among millions of martial artists, there is only one master. Under the control of this master, people will live and die as they wish. There is no room for resistance, Xu Kuang said. What? How can there be such a martial art? This is too exaggerated. This is more than just, I am the best in the world. It is simply... GMO suddenly did not know how to continue, because Xu Kuang's statement was simply too absurd. It was simply beyond everyone's imagination. Let me finish. That ruler is not truly able to control everyone indiscriminately. Instead, he has a specific purpose. He can only control those who are completely under his control. To achieve this goal, he undoubtedly needs an enormous amount of manpower, material, and financial resources. He needs an extremely secretive base, and he needs to recruit a large number of talents from the pugilistic world every year. Only with this premise can he perform the true spirit deduction. Elder, can you be more specific? When Mo Tianji heard the words a huge amount of manpower, material and financial resources, an extremely secretive base, he suddenly thought of the similarities between those who had died. His heartbeat quickened unconsciously. Be more specific? How should I describe it? According to the most primitive way, after a person has mastered the cultivation method of Myriad Saint's true spirit, he starts to make preparations. Then he will. Xu Kuang pondered for a while and considered his words carefully. Then he said, Myriad Saint's true spirit, to put it simply, is eating people. Eating people. When everyone heard this, they could not help but feel a chill down their spines. These two words might be inconceivable to ordinary people, but at their level, they could completely understand the profound meaning of these two words. Yes, the end result is eating people. From the time they are weak, they start to devour. And this kind of devouring is different from ordinary devouring. This kind of devouring is devouring the true spirit. As Xu Kuang spoke, everyone could even clearly see the hair on Xu Kuang's exposed skin standing straight up. Obviously, the fear that this matter had caused him was so deep that it was practically ingrained in him. First, find the young man with good potential and kill his family members one by one. Then, turn the young man into an orphan and bring him back to the villa to cultivate his true spirit. Once he becomes a martial artist and has a true spirit, he will use the heart manipulation art to lock his true spirit. Then, when his cultivation has reached a certain level, he will be sent to the pugilistic world to gain experience. Everything will be based on increasing one's strength. There will even be specific missions to increase one's cultivation. If he can't complete the mission, just a thought from the heart manipulation art will be enough to kill him. No matter where he is, even if he is at the end of the world, just a thought is enough. After killing him, that person's true spirit will be guided by the heart manipulation art and return to the arms of the ruler, becoming a part of the ruler's cultivation. This is the so-called cultivation process. The body does not need to exert any effort at all to increase one's cultivation. Moreover, the cultivation obtained will be the purest and purest origin energy. Once the heart manipulation art is successfully implanted, even a peak saint will not be able to remove it afterwards. However, if the ruler takes the initiative to kill the controller, the cultivation obtained will be at least halved, or even completely useless. The best way to obtain cultivation is to let them fight and kill in the pugilistic world without involving themselves in any karma. In this way, the ruler can fully absorb their true spirit after death. As Xu Kuang spoke, everyone felt cold sweat trickling down their bodies. There was actually such an evil cultivation method in the world. No wonder Xu Kuang named it cannibalism. It was indeed cannibalism. Moreover, It was absolutely the most evil cultivation method in the world. In addition, this cultivation method has another level restriction. For example, when the paragon's cultivation is only at the heaven level, he can only absorb earth-level true spirits. However, once the paragon reaches the level of a saint, it means that this cultivation method is close to completion. Then he can absorb any level of true spirit. In addition, the higher the cultivation of the controller, the more powerful the true spirit produced after death will be. This cultivation method will not interfere with the paragon's cultivation progress. The paragon can cultivate as usual, and use the treasures of heaven and earth to increase his cultivation. All of this is feasible. The power of the true spirit absorbed is equivalent to an extra income, a windfall. Chapter 2362. Often, people would realize that this person's cultivation level would increase by another level the next day. It's a weird thing. And this process doesn't require the help of heavenly treasures. But the cruel thing about this technique is that, from the beginning to the end, it requires the sacrifice of hundreds of millions of martial artists. I see. But even though it's shocking that ruler only controls those who have already grown in his hands, it's not to the point where he's the only one, right? Tianji asked. Before reaching the supreme realm of the All-Saints Celestial Spirit, the Dominator can only control those who are already under his control. However, once he reaches the supreme realm, he can control anyone he wants. He can even use the mind manipulation skill on someone of the same level as him. He can also take the opponent's cultivation for himself unknowingly. Crazy Book added. What? It has such a terrifying effect after reaching the highest level? Isn't that heaven-defying? Yang was shocked. Isn't that so? Otherwise, how can this demonic technique be called the biggest taboo in the Heaven Imperial Court? Back then, Thousand Saints' true devil used this demonic technique to wreak havoc in the martial world. He was unstoppable. Finally, the righteous and evil sects gathered the strength of 18 experts and attacked together. Only then did they completely annihilate him. Do you know who these 18 experts were? Crazy Book's eyes were shining. The rest of them were also in awe. Who were they? Everyone asked in unison. Master Yun Shuileihan Yao Xaner Yuan Tianjie Zihao, and all the other experts after Emperor Yi plus the 7 experts who dominated the world. With so many people working together, they were lucky enough to kill that Thousand Saints true devil. That was also the only time in the life of Emperor Yi and only saint that everyone worked together. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. Even with such a lineup, the 7 experts still died tragically in the hands of Thousand Saints true devil. And at that time, Thousand Saints true devil was only one step away from reaching the highest level of Thousand Saints true spirit. If he really reached the highest level, even if the 18 experts worked together, they would only be defeated. After Crazy Book finished telling this story, the room suddenly became silent. Emperor 1, Empress 1, only the Holy Monarch and all the members of the Holy Monarch had joined forces. There was also the sacrifice of the 7 ultimates. A total of 18 peerless experts were working together to fight a myriad saints true devil. These people were all legendary figures who stood at the peak of the heavenly imperial court. They could move clouds with a stomp of their feet and shatter mountains with a wave of their hands. Any one of them was enough to make the entire world tremble. However, even with such a lineup, 7 of them were still killed by the myriad saints true devil. The remaining people fought with their lives on the line before they were lucky enough to kill the myriad saints true devil. Just what level had the cultivation of that myriad saints true devil reached? As for what level he had reached, no one present could say for sure. The only thing they were certain of was that myriad holy true devil had cultivated the myriad holy true spirit. It was very likely to be the cultivation method of the current conspirator. That day, combining the celestial palaces was something that only super strong people could barely do. Could these people present repeat the past? In this world, how many experts like Di and Empress were there? Even if all of the people present here were added together, they might only be able to match up to one person. Even if they were to go up against one person, they would still be defeated. At this moment, the atmosphere in the room was extremely oppressive. Even Chu Yang and Mo Tianji were no exception. In fact, their hearts were even heavier than before, as if they were being weighed down by lead. According to the situation in front of them, there was more than a 90% chance that they were facing a cultivator who was cultivating the myriad saints' true spirit. What was even more frightening was that this cultivator was none other than the #1 person in the celestial palaces who controlled the entire celestial palaces, Lord Yun. He had unparalleled power in the entire world. He was the #1 expert in the entire world. He was the #1 power in the entire world. He was the #1 wealth in the entire world. As long as he gave the order, the entire celestial palaces would be in an uproar. Tens of billions of people would wholeheartedly support him. Such an opponent. How should they deal with it? The situation was so bad that they had never seen it before. Senior Book King, based on what you know. Were De Empress De and Holy Monarch only were injured when they attacked the 10,000 Saints True Devil? Mo Tianji pondered and asked, if they were, how serious were their injuries? That battle was extremely tragic. Other than the 7 absolutes who lost their lives, everyone else was also injured. Some of them were so severely injured that they were on the verge of death. It was said that at the end of that battle, if it wasn't for the Purple Cloud Heavenly Emperor, Zihao, who transformed himself into a sword and made a suicidal attack, the myriad Holy True Devil would have died. Furthermore, the Eastern Royal Celestial Emperor Shui Leihan unleashed the Eastern Royal Divine Sense, which was a matter of life and death. Together with Zihao, they managed to severely injure the 10,000 Saints True Devil, bringing a glimmer of hope to the end of this battle. After that battle, Zihao and Shui Leihan were unable to continue fighting. The Demon Emperor, Sky Demon Xe, used all of her cultivation to activate the ultimate Sky Demon realm, trapping the heavily injured Holy True Devil. The Cloud Master led the other experts in the Sky Demon realm to engage in a battle to the death with the Holy True Devil. However, even so, the battle situation was still not optimistic. If it weren't for the 7 absolutes risking their lives and activating the 7 absolutes return to the Heaven's Peerless technique, the Holy True Devil's cultivation would have been reduced by 70%. And after this attack, the 7 ultimates all perished. In the end, the saint used the Sword of Righteousness from the stars, using his heart as a sword and his will to control the sword, and crashed into the Holy True Devil's chest. The Sword of Will exploded in the Holy True Devil's chest, completely destroying the Holy True Devil. However, after that attack, Master Cloud no longer had the strength to fight. After this battle, the first Emperor, the Empress, and the only saint were all exhausted. In order to completely eliminate the Devil Calamity, no one entered the myriad Saint True Devil's domain. Instead, 11 of them used their remaining power to burn the myriad Saint Manor, myriad Saint Mountain and myriad Saint Old Devil's corpse into ashes. The entire mountain was also burned to the ground after that battle. Since then, the legend of the Holy True Devil no longer existed in the pugilistic world. After that battle, the first Emperor, the Empress, and the only saint announced that they would go into seclusion for 10,000 years to heal their injuries. Kuang Shu sighed. After another 10,000 years, the extraterrestrial demons invaded, and the Great War of the Purple Cloud Heavens broke out. The Heavenly Emperor of the Purple Cloud, Zihao, died a heroic death in battle. Originally, Zihao's strength was only second to the Cloud Master. If it wasn't for the fact that he had lost so much strength in the battle that he hadn't fully recovered, then, it's hard to say what the final result of the Great War of the Purple Cloud Heavens would have been. Kuang Shu sighed. Everyone sighed in unison. To Kuang Shu and the others, the Heavenly Emperor of the Purple Cloud, Zihao, was undoubtedly an immortal legend, an insurmountable myth and also a true idol. He would rather break than bend, rather die than submit, and go against the current regardless of the difficulties and dangers. From a nobody to the Heavenly Emperor of the Purple Cloud, Zihao's life was an immortal legend in the Heaven Imperial Court. When the news of the legend's death spread out, the whole world mourned and the common people mourned. Chuyang sighed. Since that's the case, the inheritance of the Holy True Devil should have been cut off. But now it has appeared in the human world again. During this period, a glint flashed across his eyes as he suddenly thought of something. Senior Shu, you said that when everyone is severely injured and unable to continue fighting, Master Yun will be in a better state than the others even though he's also unable to continue fighting. Am I right? Kuang Shu was startled for a moment and said, yes, that was the rumor back then. We didn't participate in this battle. Facing the Holy True Devil that wreaked havoc in the Heaven Imperial Court, we weren't qualified to participate in that battle. When he said this, the 4 7-stars protectors of Demon Emperor Tian, Demon Emperor Tian and Demon Emperor Tian lowered their heads in shame. Yes, that's right. The Cloud Master's last attack was when the Holy True Devil was about to run out of energy, and he brazenly launched the star's awe-inspiring righteous sword. This sword used the heart as the sword and the will to control the sword. Actually, there's no true sword, And the Cloud Master's body is equivalent to the sword's body, right? Jianghu asked. That's right. Kwang Shu nodded. This was a common knowledge question among high-level martial artists. As long as one was qualified enough in the Heaven Imperial Court, they would naturally know this. And for this sword, the Cloud Master himself directly crashed into the Holy True Devil's chest, right? Jianghu asked. That's right. Kwang Shu nodded again. After his entire body crashed into the Holy True Devil, the Holy True Devil would definitely counterattack on the verge of death, right? So the Cloud Master was seriously injured at that time, causing him to be unable to continue fighting. Jianghu continued to ask. Yes, this is without a doubt. Facing the final counterattack of the Holy True Devil, I believe that anyone would be seriously injured. Kwang Shu nodded. The result might be like that, but before that there's still a little bit of time. After the Cloud Master crashed into the Holy True Devil, there was still a little bit of time before the sword chi exploded and the Holy True Devil was annihilated. Jianghu sighed. What are you trying to say? What can happen in such a little bit of time? Kwang Shu and the others couldn't help but feel a little surprised when they saw Jianghu chasing after this question. This kind of thing, shouldn't it be obvious just by thinking about it? What could happen in such a little bit of time? Like a flash of lightning, a white steed flashed by. I think that it must be the saint's idea to completely destroy all traces of the Holy True Devil's existence after the battle. Jianghu didn't wait for Kwang Shu to reply. He directly nodded and said with certainty, this is a natural result. It's logical. Chapter 2363. After the battle, since all the related items were destroyed, there was naturally no need to divide the spoils. And when Saint Monarch fell into the arms of Thousand Saints' true demon, everyone else was severely injured. No one saw the subtle movements of the two of them entangled together. What could be in the arms of Thousand Saints' true demon? This could be an eternal mystery. Jianghu sneered. Who has seen the space ring of Thousand Saints' true demon? Since he is a demon, he should have such a space ring with him, right? The space ring is like a hot potato. No one dares to mention it or ask about it. No one would believe that such a demon would wreak havoc in the world. The most precious items could only be carried by him. And among everyone present, I believe that only Saint Monarch has a slight chance of getting these items. Moreover, after all the corpses and evidence are destroyed, no one will have any more doubts. Jianghu sneered. Everyone in the world wants to erase all traces of Thousand Saints' true demon. This is undoubtedly an excellent reason and one that everyone can accept. However, no one expected that there were actually people with selfish motives. Jianghu sighed deeply. Mo Tianji had been silent for a long time. At this moment he began to speak. He paused between each word and said carefully, the phenomenon that we have encountered now is basically consistent with the legendary 10,000 Saints' true spirit. We can be sure that our opponent is a schemer who has cultivated the 10,000 Saints' true spirit. What is even more frightening is that the people who have died in our hands are the true spirits cultivated by that person over the years. Taking advantage of the fact that they were killed by us, all of their true spirits were devoured by him. Therefore, all of them do not have a soul after death, let alone a true spirit. According to Senior Xu Kuang's description, we can infer that someone must have obtained the cultivation method of Thousand Saints' true spirit during the battle. And this person is the most suspicious Saint Monarch. When he said, Saint Monarch is the most suspicious, Mo Tianji said it with difficulty. Hearing this, the faces of everyone present were also heavy and gloomy to the extreme. And now, Xie Dan Xiong is about to ascend to the throne of Mo Yun Tian. To the world this is not a big deal. In fact, it is a good thing to see. Therefore, it is normal for Saint Monarch to secretly make arrangements. Mo Tianji smiled faintly. Perhaps in the eyes of many people with the noble status of the Saint Monarch, there is no need for him to do so. However, we have always overlooked the fact that there is also the cultivation of the myriad saints' true devil. Before Senior Book Kwang told us about it, I believe we had never thought of this even in our wildest dreams. Most of those who came here to die are peerless experts. This news had to be reported to the Demon Empress as soon as possible. This news could not be transmitted through any means of communication, because any means of communication could be intercepted by Saint Monarch. Moreover, Saint Monarch was in ink cloud heaven now. For a moment, only Chu Yang and his subordinates were left in the room. Brother Tribulation, Sword Master, Zi Sheqing, Mo Qingwu, Mo Lei, Chu Le, Tribulation Spirit, Brother Hu. But still no one said anything. Everyone's expression was extremely heavy. Going against the Dharma Supreme when they were in the heavenly realm was already very difficult. But compared to now, the difference was like heaven and earth. The difference in difficulty was more than 1,000,000,000 times. Next we have to do this. Mo Tianji paced around. First, we must not let Guru Yun find out that we have already discovered his biggest secret. So, we still have to kill those who should be killed. But, Boss Chuyang, I'm afraid you will have to work harder. Mo Tianji turned and looked at Chuyang. Chuyang nodded deeply. I can only kill him. I will kill him with the Tribulation Sword. The Tribulation Sword also had the ability to devour. It could completely devour the real spirit. Chuyang understood what Mo Tianji meant. Targets above the saint level must all be killed with the Tribulation Sword. Or we can leave one or two of the real spirits and let him absorb them. Mo Tianji said, otherwise he will be suspicious. With his scheming and deep foresight, a little flaw may cause a huge change. We need to stabilize the situation for now. We cannot break the situation in advance. That's right. Chuyang agreed. Your mission is also relatively heavy. You can kill targets below the saint level without any qualms. But you have to capture those above the saint level alive as much as possible. If boss is not present. Mo Tianji looked at the other brothers. The brothers and the girls all had bitter looks on their faces. The lower the cultivation, the more they had to kill. But they had to capture those with higher cultivation alive. This was really a huge problem. But the current situation had led them to this step. What could they do? They had to do their best even if they had to risk their lives. Also, Chuyang gritted his teeth. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to train our troops. Experts from all over the world are coming. Before Xie Danxiong ascends to the throne, each of us has to personally experience thousands of battles. Our cultivation and comprehension must be improved. I don't need to tell you why, right? Everyone nodded heavily. Even if you train yourselves to death, you have to improve your own cultivation. Mo Tianji added. GMO Luo Kudi and Rue Butong wailed at the same time.